Chapter 1464. Just as Supreme Huan Pei's hairpin was in a mess, and she was about to collapse, her disciple, Ali, rushed over. "Go kill those 2 insects and save my master." In a moment of desperation, Ali directly gave orders, but she completely forgot that the person under her was not a normal human being, but a zombie. How could it understand the human language? These orders were usually completed through zombie whistles after a long period of training. They cannot be too precise and could only complete a very rough password. It was already very good to remember dozens of orders. She did not realize this because the battlefield was too chaotic and her master was too dangerous. Fortunately, as soon as the zombie king under her entered the battlefield, it immediately performed perfectly and could always do what it should do. It was still a kick. It was kicked from the back. Under the kick, the insect's head burst like a watermelon. It was still a coordinated movement of the whole body, and the hand also followed the kick. It should be similar to the muscle reflex arc linkage of some animals, which was normal for zombies whose movements were not very coordinated. Supreme Huan Pei, who was finally out of danger, relaxed, and her body immediately softened because her spinal nerves were injured and she could not support it. Ali was greatly distressed and subconsciously wanted to jump out to support her master. When she tried to move, she remembered that her thigh had been tightly held for several days. The strength of steel and iron was not something she could break free from. When she was about to speak, she had already floated out. This zombie, it knew when to let go. She could not think so much. Holding her master, she felt a little sad. She had already felt her master's weakness, which was the phenomenon after the body was seriously injured. It was not a big deal for a Supreme, and she could still recover, but it needed time. "Master, I'll carry you," Ali said with a crying tone. She was an abandoned baby raised by her master until now and had a strong and inseparable friendship. In front of her master, everything else could be given up, even the bounded domain. Huan Pei shook her head weakly. "Silly child, go? Where to go? Without a home, where can we go? Don't worry about me. Master can blow zombie whistles and command zombies. Ali, the one you brought is..." Supreme Huan Pei was very suspicious when she saw a zombie beside them, kicking several small insects to death. This zombie was very strange, but now she was seriously injured and couldn't put her soul in an unimportant direction, so she asked her disciple. Ali spoke very fast. "It's a newly awakened zombie king. It's very strong and can kick a real monarch insect to death. We were attacked halfway. Thanks to it, otherwise we couldn't come here." After saying a few words, she was moved in her heart. It was too dangerous on a battlefield. If she stood here without moving, she would be a live target. She knew herself. Even if she stayed in front of her master, it would be difficult to protect her. She might as well, therefore. He tentatively looked at that king zombie and said, "Hey you, carry my master. You must ensure his safety." Ali patted the zombie king's shoulder and pointed to her master. She was not sure whether the zombie king could understand her. On the battlefield, the zombie king would always listen to whoever subdued it. It was different from wild zombies and old zombies because it had the most basic spiritual intelligence and was exclusive. It was unwilling to accept the command of a second human being. No matter who she was, whether she was a master or an elder or a powerful one, the zombie king wouldn't care about it. To her relief, the zombie king obviously didn't refuse the beautiful woman with soft limbs in front of her. It rushed over and carried Huan Pei, just like when it carried Ali. It was so fast that Ali didn't even have time to put clothes on her master. What a sensible zombie. Huan Pei was very embarrassed because the zombie was very considerate. It was afraid that her spine would be damaged and she would not be able to support herself, so it pressed her tightly against the zombie's neck. Her legs were like iron clamps, and she felt that her body was floating forward with the zombie. The instantaneous acceleration made her lean back unconsciously. If she had not been pressed firmly, she would have broken her waist. Ali comforted her. "Master, don't be afraid. This zombie king flies very steadily. You won't fall down when you ride it. Ali is experienced. You just need to relax and blow the zombie whistle." How could she be relieved? This was because the zombie beneath him was already charging straight towards the largest, fiercest, and ugliest true monarch on the battlefield. Its body was covered with compound eyes, and there were mouth parts on its head and tail that were densely packed with sharp teeth. Its entire body was sticky and dripping. There was no weakness when it attacked. Its head and tail were connected, and its two huge mouths were tearing back and forth. After biting the opponent, it would die and flip. Finally, its body would curl into a ball, and the two mouths to the front and back would bite the opponent at the same time. Its body would then straighten, and it would often tear the opponent into two halves. Since the beginning of the battle, a Yuanian cultivator and a zombie king had died in its mouth. The rest of the zombies were bitten to death by it. It was the most ferocious insect on the battlefield. According to her analysis, it should be in the realm of primordial spirit. She had been avoiding such a ferocious creature. She could only use the zombie king as a substitute. Now she had lost one. The other zombie king that was fighting with it was also retreating step by step. It was bitten black and blue all over. It seemed that it couldn't hold on for long. It was not that Huan Pei was afraid of fighting, but she was born to be very resistant to such insects. Just like some people were afraid of snakes, some people were afraid of rats. She belonged to the physique that was very disgusted by worms. This was something that could not be changed, even if she became a supreme. She could face zombies calmly, but she didn't want to face a caterpillar. This kind of directional fear was not rare among humans. So when she found that she was being led to bump into the biggest and most disgusting caterpillar on the battlefield, her heart was in her throat. Being able to kill an Een spirit insect and being able to kill a primordial spirit insect were two different concepts. The most terrible thing was that her disciple, Li, was still following behind. As her master, she couldn't show her timidity. She couldn't make a fool of herself in front of her disciple and show her weak side. But that girl was still following behind her. Yes, it's that insect. Kick it to death. Huan Pei felt her whole body suddenly tighten. Even the nerves in her spine that had been damaged were tensed up again. This at least allowed her to control her behavior. She didn't cry or drool. Otherwise, how could she be in such a state in the eyes of the other juniors? The charging collision only took a moment. The king zombie under her lifted and pulled at a speed she couldn't understand at all and appeared behind the worm. She only knew that this kind of lifting technique was unique to zombies, but she didn't know that in this world, the orthodoxy was complicated and profound. There was also a kind of star lifting technique that had the same effect. The speed, timing, and judgment were all perfect. Then, it was a violent kick. What was the point of kicking such a huge worm-type insect beast? In the previous battles, she had seen other king-level zombies throwing countless punches and kicks, but against the liquefied body of the wriggling worm, no matter how strong they were, it was useless. But this kick was different. There must be some kind of mysterious power in it. Was it unique to zombies? Was it the supreme power of magic? But she had never thought that this kick was a full-force kick of a top swordsman that contained sword intent. With this kick, the worm's body seemed to be blown up like a balloon and then suddenly burst. Thick, stinky, and poisonous body fluid splashed everywhere. Huan Pei felt that the zombie skillfully moved its body to avoid the splashing body fluid everywhere. She couldn't help but feel relieved. She was saved. This was an emperor zombie. As soon as she relaxed, her nerves that were naturally tensed up in times of danger immediately collapsed. Huan Pei tried her best to control herself. She couldn't cry. She couldn't drool. With a strong will, she controlled herself from losing her composure. But she could control the upper part, but not the lower part. His nerves were damaged to begin with, so how could it be the same as normal? The Emperor Zombie felt something warm spurting out from the back of its neck. What the hell? Was it splashed with dog's blood? Chapter 1465. Huan Pei was really embarrassed. It was too embarrassing. Fortunately, it was a zombie that didn't know anything. Otherwise, how could she face others in the future? Incontinence wasn't rare in the mortal world, but it was inconceivable for it to happen in a cultivator, especially a true monarch. There were too many coincidences too many helplessness, and in the end, they all fell into that one spurt. There was no other way. Since it had already been sprayed, it couldn't be taken back, right? At most, she could change the clothes of the guy below. Change it to one with stronger water absorption. Only now did Huan Pei realize that this zombie was wearing a high-quality silk robe that only cultivators could wear, and the style was completely different from the king zombie world. It seemed that this guy was also a cultivator when he was alive, and a powerful one at that. Otherwise, he couldn't have awakened such an abnormal magical power. It was a primordial spirit insect, and it was killed with one kick. It was really unbelievable. It was just that this silk robe didn't absorb water at all. However, Ali, who had just caught up, still mentioned the pot that didn't boil and shouted, "It was too thrilling. You can't fight so hard in the future. Look at your back. It's soaked with sweat. And, Master, zombies have pores? They can sweat." Huan Pei felt that there was a problem with the education of her disciple all these years. But now he had to make up for it. So he explained, "Yes, it's just that it's relatively rare. When they burst out their body's potential, and they will sweat. They were also human when they were alive. Sweating was just a small episode. Continuing to sweep was the main point. With the great killing weapon of the Emperor Zombie, the monarch insects were wiped out one by one. The situation began to become balanced, and then gradually shifted to the King Zombie world, until the autumn wind swept away the fallen leaves in the end. When all the monarch insects were wiped out, the Emperor Zombie under Huan Pei stopped and began to walk in circles aimlessly. Ali laughed. Master, this Emperor Zombie is very particular about the matching of realms. It doesn't bully the weak. It seems that it must have come from a big force when it was alive. Unfortunately, it became like this. The battle ended, and the King Zombie world won a Pyrrhic victory. Most of the losses occurred before Ali came to the rescue. But no matter what, they had turned the situation around. This was something that none of the King Zombies dared to believe. They thought that they were going to be completely wiped out this time. Ali became the greatest contributor, hugging his master and accepting the respect of his fellow disciples. She was the one who gave birth to the Emperor Zombie when she was a zombie. She was the one who rushed to the place where she was needed the most of the time. That zombie. Even if it was an Emperor Zombie, it was still just a zombie. Did it need to be saluted? More than half of the human cultivators and zombies were injured. This was a heavy blow to the small realm, but they had used their own perseverance to win the right to survive. This was the cultivation world. They came out empty-handed and were warmly welcomed in the domain. Sorrow needed to be forgotten, and life had to go on. Ali obtained the right to tame the Emperor Zombie. Even the true monarchs in the sect couldn't compete with her, because everyone was afraid that if someone else did it, it would cause the Emperor's Zombie to resist. If that was the case, then the gains would not make up for the losses. The higher the level of a zombie, the more autonomous it would be. This was no joke. Now that the insect swarm had just been pacified, it was still unknown how many similar insect swarms there were in the universe. If another swarm came, without this Emperor Zombie holding the fort, there would be no need to defend the bounded domain. Under Ali's arrangement, the Emperor Zombie was placed in a large manor at the foot of the mountain. The scenery was beautiful, and there were no servants. Everything was the best treatment, including a huge coffin inlaid with gold and jade in the bedroom. Humans were divided into different grades, and zombies were no exception. Wild zombies could only live in a large shared room, which was a thin wooden coffin in a cave. Old zombies were better. They changed their dormitory. Several of them shared a room, and the coffin also changed into a large coffin made of solid wood. Needless to say, King Zombies had their own large copper coffin. Dozens of mortals couldn't even carry it. As for this Emperor Zombie, it didn't want to live in the sect no matter what. For some reason, even if they arranged a large hall for it, it didn't want to go in. It just stood there like a wooden pestle, throwing a tantrum. Later, under Ali's request, she took her Emperor Zombie to wander around the sect. No matter if it was quiet, lively, beautiful, dangerous, cave, or building, it didn't want to go in. Therefore, she could only lead it out of the sect. However, She didn't expect that once it went down the mountain and came to this sect's manor, it wouldn't move. That meant this place was not bad. It would just stay here as a zombie. Fortunately, it wasn't far from the sect. It was very convenient to go up and down the mountain. Therefore, she sent the servants and servants to other places. No one was left here. It was to make a home for the zombie lord. Ali's heart was also relieved. Otherwise, if this guy asked to be raised in a free-range manner, she was afraid that she would lose this proud rare creature. After the war, it was very troublesome. There were countless things that needed to be done, including after the battle, because the zombies' desire for blood was aroused. So no matter if it was king zombies or old zombies, they would be pulled to the celestial phenomenon in batches to continue to receive shock waves to eliminate the negative energy. There was also the matter of personnel's funeral. The sect's internal affairs were adjusted, the wild zombies were domesticated, and the personnel was very tight. However, Ali only had one task: to take care of the Emperor's zombie at all costs. This was the guarantee of the domain's future. Emperor zombies had never appeared in the history of the King Zombie faction, so they actually didn't know what they should look like. The seniors didn't leave any words about this thing. It was only a legend, but they didn't expect that the legend would become a reality. In terms of fighting power, it was true that it was an Emperor zombie. If it really fought, it might be able to fight against the human yang spirit. Of course, they wouldn't do that. The human yang spirit could be reborn, but the zombies couldn't. But in case of any accident, it could compete with yang spirit-level insects or demon beasts. This was what the King Zombie cultivators valued the most. They had never thought of fighting with the human Tao. How to raise an Emperor zombie. This was a new topic. Because no one had experience, Ali had to explore it alone. She would come to the manor every day to accompany it, to see how to further communicate with it, to deepen their understanding. In her opinion, this was a zombie with a story. If this Emperor zombie could tell its story one day, she was afraid that this Emperor zombie would truly be subdued. This was a big goal, but she wasn't in a hurry. What Ali needed to solve now was a small goal: how to make the Emperor's zombie happy. Did zombies have emotions? Of course, ordinary zombies didn't, but King Zombies had this aspect, not to mention that she was facing an Emperor zombie. In the end, Ali finally found a fact that made her feel helpless. When she dressed formally and covered her whole body, this thing's temper was always bad, and it ignored her orders. But if she wore cooler clothes, the happier it would be. She didn't know how happy this guy would be if she was cool to the end. We can fight her then? She couldn't even try. She finally understood that this was not an Emperor zombie, but a yellow zombie. Chapter 1466. There were also important matters. The zombie horde had suffered heavy losses and needed to be replenished. Not only did they need to train the wild zombies into old zombies, they also needed to bring more wild zombies back to the mountain. They really couldn't allocate enough manpower, so Ali was given the task of bringing wild zombies back to the mountain. Wild zombies came from a mysterious space cave in the domain. They weren't inside the mountain and were strictly protected. Of course, this protection was only for mortals. They were afraid that the wild zombies would run out and hurt people. A long, long time ago, before the King Zombie Orthodoxy had refined zombies, they had a headache because of the zombies that kept appearing all over the domain. Finally, they discovered this mysterious place and started to refine it into treasures. This was a process. To bring back these zombies that were transported over, they needed a certain amount of protection. It was very troublesome to just rely on cultivators to suppress them. These things were all invulnerable and had the abilities of a normal Yuaniing. How could they be suppressed by force? Therefore, they needed a method. The best method was to stick to Fuchu Town and then let a real tamed zombie lead them. Usually, they only needed to bring a few old zombies. Even the King Zombie didn't need to be mobilized. The reason why they gave this simple task to Ali was to help her build trust with the Emperor Zombie. Just contact wasn't very useful. They needed tasks and things to slowly build some kind of relationship in daily life. They didn't need to be locked up in the manor all day. Ali took the Emperor Zombie out. They flew in the air one after the other. Actually, it was hard to tell who was the human and who was the zombie. In Ali's view, this emperor zombie was slowly becoming human. For example, it never slept in a coffin. Although she knew it didn't really understand, Ali still impatiently nagged at it. Wait, we will reach a big cave. There will be new zombies coming out from there. Most of them are dead when they come over. We need to treat them specially and then bury them. There will also be some that are still alive. They're the wild zombies that we speak of. Actually, you are one of them. Do you still remember who brought you back to the mountain gate? You don't remember? That's normal. You hadn't awakened at that time. You were just a wild zombie that didn't know anything. Ali said slowly and softly. Not all of the wild zombies can be used. Many of them are disabled, and some of them are even severely damaged. As for those who are completely useless, we will get rid of them. This is not cruel, but they themselves are also in pain. It is not necessarily a bad thing to be freed as soon as possible. Moreover, if they are allowed to move freely in the domain, they will cause harm to ordinary mortals. They are not you. They know what to do and what not to do. We will use the strong soul subduing talisman on those who are still in good health. This is just a precautionary measure because most of them will be in a state of coma when they come out of the spatial cavern. When these zombies have accumulated to a certain number, we will bring them back. The soul subduing talisman is not safe. They don't know where they are going, so they will be very confused and will resist. At this time, if they have their own kind to lead them, they will become much more docile, which is good for everyone. Ali warned, when we get there, you don't have to do anything else. Just watch. But when we set off, you have to exert some pressure on them so that they won't cause trouble. This kind of task can be completed by a few ordinary old zombies. Even a king zombie won't dare to cause trouble, let alone you. You're just a guide. Do you understand? Don't bully them too much. They are all pitiful people. Don't scare them. She wanted the emperor zombie to do his duty, but she was also afraid that he would overdo it. This was Ali's careful thinking. She still felt that she could not completely control this guy, but she could not find a way to break through. Could it be that it was really completely cold? The domain was not big, so the mountain gate was not far from the mysterious cavern. To them, it was only a quarter of an hour. The cultivator stationed there, and Ali exchanged information. How many zombies were sent through the spatial cavern in the past few years? How many were still alive? How many were still usable? How many could be taken away? While Ali was there, she did not forget about her emperor zombie from the corner of her eyes. She saw this guy move on his own, which was rare. He stared at the mysterious spatial cavern in a daze. In fact, it was also the place where he came from. The handover is very fast. For cultivators, some numbers are not a problem. However, when Ali finishes the handover, the emperor's corpse is still standing there motionlessly. Her heart is moved. Perhaps, in this place where it came from, it will remember something. She did not urge it. She just waited silently with it until a few days later, another zombie was thrown out of the spatial cavern. The emperor's zombie still did not move. Ali still did not urge it. Anyway, this kind of task did not require time. She knew what she needed to do most. As long as she could completely subdue this emperor zombie. So what if she delayed all the zombies here? There was no comparison. The emperor zombie stood there for a month. During this period, more than 10 zombies were sent here intermittently. Most of them had completely lost their vitality and could not be more stiff. A few of them were missing arms and legs. Only 2 of them were really intact. In other words, the number of wild zombies produced in a month might not be accurate, but it was about the same. The emperor zombie retreated from the spatial cavern and did not show any special reaction. Ali was a little disappointed, but she did not say anything. What was the point of saying anything? She checked the wild zombies and got ready to go. Over the years, there were 15 wild zombies, which were the supplement of combat power. But these zombies might not all be able to become old zombies. There were a lot of losses in the process. For example, they did not listen to taming, fought with each other, got lost in the universe, and got destroyed in the sky. So, it could be seen that almost half of the old zombies were lost in the battle with Zerg. It really made everyone in the faction feel distressed. That was the accumulation of hundreds of years. The 15 wild zombies were all pasted with the soul-subduing talisman. It was actually a talisman that restricted the brain's thinking. It was only used to suppress the possible irritation of the zombies. For most of the wild zombies, this talisman was enough. Only the wildest zombies would show signs of resistance. When the zombies were first domesticated, they would usually kill these wild zombies that did not listen to taming. But now they would not do that. Because the wilder the zombies were, the more powerful they were. The wild zombies flew up in order. They were quite obedient, but there were 2 of them that could not be controlled, even with the talisman pasted on them. One of them was rampaging in the formation in the air, and the other one was simply playing with the dead dog and did not fly up. Ali looked at the Emperor zombie next to her suspiciously. It shouldn't be, not to mention the Emperor zombie. Even if there was a king zombie here, no zombie would dare to mess around. What is going on? This guy did not even release his spiritual pressure. Chapter 1467. Under Ali's gaze, the Emperor's zombie suddenly rushed out. It didn't do anything else but kick wildly with its legs. Even the 2 thick-skinned zombies roared endlessly. It was the first time Ali had seen such a violent method to make wild zombies obey. It seemed that there was no record in the sect's ancient records. What made her happy was that the Emperor zombie knew her intentions and knew what to do. What made her puzzled was why it didn't use a simpler method and only needed to use the most primitive aura suppression between zombies. Why did it have to use punches and kicks? Or was this guy just a violent maniac? She couldn't tell. The mission was a bit bumpy, but she finally finished it. Along the way, almost all the zombies were beaten. Fortunately, this guy still knew the severity and didn't break any of them. Returning to the mountain gate and handing in the task, Ali was very depressed, so he went to find his master who was already in good condition. In the past few months of quiet recuperation, coupled with the power of elixirs, Supreme Huan Pei was able to resist this kind of injury and had already recovered. Now, she was just doing the final nursing. Master, what do you think is the weakness of this Emperor zombie? Supreme Huan Pei lit an incense with her bare hands. The past was like a dream. The battle scene was still vivid in her mind. There were many things that could be said, and some that couldn't be said. But in terms of training zombies, she was much more experienced than her disciple. My king zombie bloodline has no experience with Emperor zombies. This is the first time in history. So, everything has to be fumbled. Ali, you are the person closest to it. So, you have a big responsibility. Then, based on your observation these days, does this Emperor zombie have any weakness? Ali was a bit embarrassed, but in front of her master, she wouldn't hide it. She said softly, Master, this Emperor zombie is a bit perverted. If I wear too little, his temper is good. If I wear too much, he ignores me. Especially those hands of hers. They were very dishonest. Of course, this is just my guess. Maybe it was a flower thief in its previous life. In the end, it was caught and made into a zombie as punishment. And I originally wanted to find a few low-level Kuan cultivators or mortal women to test his reaction, but I always felt that it might be inappropriate. Master, what do you think? Huan Pei clearly stopped her. It's inappropriate. The body of an emperor's zombie is a treasure, but to those whose realm was not high enough, it was a huge poison, not to mention mortals. If something really happens, I'm afraid you won't be able to control it. Why don't we let it dry for a while? I see that you've been going there every day. That's not good. It's easy to get tired. Let's wait for 10 days to half a month and see if it has any other reaction. You should also take a break and relax. If you're always so tense, who knows when you'll inadvertently make a mistake. When a zombie reaches the level of an emperor zombie, it already has a trace of a real human shadow. You don't need me to teach you this, do you? Ali seemed to have understood something. She was a little tired of staying with that emperor corpse all day long. The key point was that that guy didn't make a sound, just like a corpse. No one would be able to endure like that forever. She was able to endure for several months because she had a sense of responsibility for the future of the sect. After several months of talking to herself and making all kinds of guesses, she needed to calm down. Good. I'll listen to Master. In the next few days, I'll go. Huan Pei smiled. Your senior sisters are going to hold a Dharma assembly for the rogue cultivators of all realms. You should also go and help. Change your mood and interact more with living humans. Don't stay with zombies for too long. You're going to become a zombie yourself. Ollie was very happy. She liked this kind of Dharma assembly very much. In the end, she still liked to stay in a lively scene. This was something determined by her personality. As for this Emperor Zombie, it was just an accident when she was a zombie. Master, then I'll go. The Emperor corpse, Huan Pei nodded. Don't worry, Master will occasionally help you take a look. Ollie, in fact, there are some things that you don't have to take too seriously. For a zombie like this, in fact, we've already lost the strong control over it. If it wants to leave, no one can stop it. So, avoid using force. Maintain a natural heart. Maybe the effect will be better? With Master support, Ali happily went to find a few senior sisters. There were a lot of things to talk about between them. About cultivation, about beauty, about news outside the universe, about their own worries, about the yearning for a Tao companion. This was something that she could not avoid at her age, because not every realm would participate in the fight for the general trend of the universe, and not every cultivator would think that they would become the tide of the changing era. Living every day happily was also a kind of cultivation attitude. It might not be worse than others. Huan Pei watched her disciple disappear into the mountains and close her eyes to meditate. But the churning in her heart could not be guessed by outsiders. As the actual ruler of the sect, she had a longer lifespan, more knowledge, sharper perception, and more meticulous thinking. This was not something that a Yuaniing newbie like Ali could compare to. Suggesting her disciple to participate in the Dharma assembly was indeed a method. But on the other hand, she had deeper considerations. She was not willing to put such a burden on Ali, who was in her prime. As an elder, master, and sect master, she could only shoulder this burden. She didn't tell anyone about her suspicions because there would only be harm if more people knew. The strength of that Emperor Zombie was enough to flatten the entire King Zombie world. Every time she thought about the battle, it would make her shudder. That guy was a killing machine. It wasn't about having infinite strength, nor was it about having tough skin and flesh. It was about having an exquisite control over the entire battlefield and the insect swarm. Such an ability wasn't something that could be achieved on a whim. Among the outer realm cultivators she knew, even the most outstanding disciples from the large sects couldn't do this. Killing a ferocious origin spirit insect with one kick. Did he really think it was a caterpillar? For this kind of thing, it was not good to keep pretending, and it was also not good to blow it out of proportion. The best way was to make it clear. She was alone. She sat like this until the sky darkened. Then she quietly slid out of the hall and out of the sect. She was the highest ruler, so of course she had the highest authority. No one could control her. As soon as he left the mountain gate, he directly landed. His target was a large manor at the foot of the mountain gate. Although it was already the planting season, there was not the slightest sign of farming. This was the result of the servants being dismissed. They were afraid that there would be some ungrateful fellow who would inadvertently offend the Emperor Zombie and bring about a fatal disaster. In fact, there was no need. It was just an act. She firmly believed that this young zombie would never kill mortals. Chapter 1468. She didn't swagger around recklessly, nor did she try to be stealthy. She knew that her every move was being sensed by this Emperor Zombie. She passed through the fields outside the manor, passed through the empty garden, and came to the house where the huge, luxurious coffin was placed. She gently landed and knocked on the door. She knew that there would be no answer, even after 3 knocks. It was just a kind of politeness. She pushed the door open and walked in. She closed the door and turned around to screen. The tall figure of the Emperor Zombie stared out of the window as if it didn't care who came in. I'm Huan Pei of Wang Zombie Taoist. I'm here to pay my respects to you. I admired your kindness in the battle outside the sky. Unfortunately, it was inconvenient for me to be here, so I was delayed. Please forgive me. Huan Pei finally said what she always wanted to say. It was up to the other party whether he admitted it or not. If the other party ignored her, she would accompany him to continue the play. If the other party admitted it, she would repay him later. The Emperor Zombie's body was motionless as if it didn't understand or didn't care. After a long time, when Huan Pei thought she was rejected, a young and lazy voice sounded. Are those zombies from the passageway all defective? Do you feel it? Huan Pei's heart was relieved. She said softly, yes. We have always thought so too. But this passage is irreversible. Besides, the orthodoxy of Wang Zombie is not good in this aspect. So after so many years, there is no achievement in this aspect. Space can't be reversed. Zombies can't be traced back. This is a mess. Do you think that it's not morally right for us to use zombies? The figure turned around. It was still the young face, but the expression had become vivid. His eyes were clear as if they had been washed. He stretched out his hand and invited her, sit. In fact, you are the host, but I'm the guest. Now it's a bit of a reversal of order. I'm not obsessed with moral cleanliness. Since it's useful, then let's use it. I'm not here to criticize you. I'm just curious about their origin. Unfortunately, it seems that this secret can't be solved for the time being. Huan Pei Dafa frowned. As a Taoist, we use some unorthodox methods. We're a joke to you. The King Zombie world is isolated and has very little interaction with the mainstream of the cultivation world. If we want to protect ourselves, we have to think of other ways. Without these zombies, our orthodoxy would have been destroyed countless times in the past 1,000 years. Just like this time, if it weren't for fellow Taoists' help, even with the zombie horde, the King Zombie's inheritance would have been lost. Lu Xiaoyi smiled but didn't say anything. He didn't agree with Huan Pei's philosophy, or rather, Wang Jiangdao's philosophy. If there were really no more zombies, then there must be other ways. How could a living person suffocate to death by urine? Cultivators were even less likely to do so. If he felt that he was weak, he could study it on his own. With the foundation of Taoism, how could there be anything that he couldn't study? Which of these so-called profound Taoist knowledge was not invented by human cultivators? He could either walk out without fear of getting lost or having a difficult journey. There was always a method that was not necessarily worse than refining zombies. However, for the cultivators here, refining zombies was the easiest and most readily available. Humans were like this. When there was an easy way in front of them, they would give up the difficulties in the future. However, which of the two ways was better? Anyone with a little knowledge would know. But he was not a king zombie, and he had no right to make decisions for others, so it was better not to say it. If he really said it, and they really listened to it, how could they survive the thousands of years before the end of the era? He couldn't guard here forever. How many years have zombies been around? Huan Pei was very serious. 1,000 years. Our king zombie began to refine zombies 1,000 years ago, but zombies appeared even earlier, maybe 100 or 80 years earlier. At that time, the elders were also annoyed by these endless zombies, so they figured out such a method. They thought that they could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, but they didn't know that it would affect their own cultivation. Now, it's hard to change it even if you drink poison to quench your thirst. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. This was indeed the trouble of small businesses. You couldn't completely apply the high theories of those big sects and big forces. Who didn't know the purity of Tao? But you had to survive first. Survival was the most realistic pressure. More than 1,000 years ago was just before and after the collapse of fate. Such a coincidence was very interesting. But this problem was too big for him to consider for the time being, let alone get involved. Seeing that he was pondering, Huan Pei probed, "Fellow Taoist, are you here for a long time? Or are you just passing by? If you want to stay for a long time, King Zombie can arrange it for you. I guarantee that you'll be satisfied." Lu Xiaoyi smiled. "I was cultivating in the turbulence, but I was brought out by your little girl. It was also a chance. You don't have to thank me. For Zerg, this is what every human cultivator should do. When the cultivation is over, I will naturally leave." Huan Pei sighed her heart. How could she not know that without a parasol tree, how could he attract a phoenix? King zombies were too small and too remote. It was not a place where such a top cultivator could stay. Their goal was the stars and the universe. Just by looking at their strength, where couldn't they go? But fortunately, his cultivation was not over yet. It should be that he still didn't understand the turbulence. This period could be as short as a few years or as long as a dozen years. Although it was a little short, it was enough for him to guard against those scattered insects. If you want people to work for you, you have to pay the price. She understood the principle of cultivating for 1 or 2,000 years too well. What price could King Zombie pay? He couldn't give her any resources. He didn't care about cultivation methods. Although zombies were a specialty, what this Taoist needed, he had already shown it in the battle. Unfortunately, her apprentice didn't understand it. She didn't want her apprentice to pay the price, because her mind was not mature enough to accept such a blow. She didn't completely understand the essence of cultivation. Only she could do it. Anyway, she had already made a fool of herself in the battle. The best way to cover it up was to continue making a fool of herself. She didn't hate this Taoist, and she didn't dislike him. This was a very complicated feeling. There was both reward and willingness. She wanted to rope him in and satisfy herself. There was both utility and fate. This was a game for adults. The key was that she couldn't take it seriously. The reason why she would rather do it herself was because she was afraid that her apprentice would take it seriously. Moreover, she also knew what kind of person he was. He didn't do anything to his apprentice because he didn't want to touch a serious person. Now, both of them knew when to be serious and when not to be serious. There were some things that they had a tacit understanding with each other. Just when she was still thinking about how to make it happen naturally, the other person who didn't want to be serious opened his mouth tacitly. Of course, I did contribute after all. Senior sister seems to owe me a set of clothes. Huan Pei smiled sweetly. Then, Huan Pei will change clothes for you. Lu Xiaoyi looked around and suggested, that coffin is not bad. It's big and sturdy enough. Moreover, it's very innovative. I think senior sister definitely hasn't tried it before. Huan Pei wasn't afraid. They were both experienced people. Why would she be afraid of this? She just didn't know if she needed to close the coffin lid when the time came. This Taoist was very abnormal. Chapter 1469. Ali came back after relaxing for more than 10 days. She found that the Emperor Zombie was still the same. However, her master ordered her to take the Emperor Zombie to the shock wave phenomenon again. The excuse was to let the Emperor Zombie stabilize its awakened skills. It was very reasonable. Do you need to stabilize it? Or do you want to learn more about the zombie's supernatural power in the phenomenon? Ali was still rambling. She didn't think that this was her master communicating with the Emperor Zombie, and it was a very deep communication. She only thought that this might be due to her master's rich experience in raising zombies. She saw more than she did. Her master did see more than she did. Lu Xiaoyi still had some new ideas to prove here. The shockwave turbulence was a very special phenomenon. He couldn't miss the opportunity. For a traveler in the universe like him, if he missed it, it would be very difficult for him to go back and look for it again. This was the current state of the two. He was in the depths of the turbulence to learn the 5 ties. Ali was doing nothing outside. She occasionally caught some wisps of spiritual vigor to pass the time. Everything was peaceful. A few years later, Huan Pei led 3 guests to tour the world of the Emperor Zombie. She didn't hide the origin of the zombies at all. For the Emperor Zombie, as long as there were big forces passing by here, she would stop and show her secrets to them. It was also a helpless action. If you didn't show it and hid it, people would think that you were artificially making zombies. That would be a disaster. For more than 1,000 years, cultivators of such big forces had passed by several times. The Emperor Zombie dealt with them in the same way. Of course, the mysterious cave must be shown to people, but the specific number of zombies in her school would not be revealed easily. It was also a kind of cunning. The guests this time were more special. There were 3 monks and 3 Buddhas. Their origins were unknown, but their Buddhism was pure and grand. As soon as they met them, they knew that they were monks from a big temple. The leader of the group was Light Virtue, and he made his purpose of coming here very clear. Their orthodoxy had recently taken some actions against the insectoids in the nearby airspace, which caused the insectoids to collapse and flee in all directions. They were responsible orthodoxies, so they sent their Buddhas to check if there were any small realms that were affected by the insectoids' actions, so that they could provide support and help as much as possible. It sounded like the peace of the universe was his responsibility. If they came too late, by the time the Buddhas came to help, the upper echelons of the king zombie world would have already perished. The remaining middle and lower echelons wouldn't be able to survive for more than a few years. It would be the rise and fall of an orthodoxy. But the Buddhas didn't leave. Instead, they were very interested in the king zombie boundary. It was this kind of interest that made Huan Pei uneasy. When a tiger shows goodwill to a sheep, what do you think the sheep will think? After observing the entrance of the mysterious space tunnel and carefully examining the zombie, the Buddhas came to the same conclusion as Lu Xiaoyi. This is a defective product. Someone was mass-producing zombies, and then, through some means, disposing of the defective products. By chance, these wastes were thrown here. Perhaps to the person who did this. This was just a very ordinary spatial hole, but they did not expect that this hole would lead to a human domain. That's probably it. It was a very sharp judgment. He was worthy of being a virtuous man who came from a big Buddhist force. Huan Pei would usually join in and ask at this time, "Then, Master Guangda, do you have a way to trace the source?" Although the king zombie world is small, it also knows the right and wrong of cultivation. For the source of zombies like this, the best way is to trace it back to the source and eliminate it completely. But the king zombie world is weak. There are only a few cultivators who can fly out of the universe. I wonder if you can think of a way. This is retreating in order to advance. First, remove yourself from the problem, and then push the problem out. Can you solve it? If you really solve it, I have nothing to say. If you can't solve it, then don't blame me for being a little inhumane by using zombies. A small domain also has its own wisdom. Of course, Guangda couldn't solve it. Not to mention he was a Buddha in the Yin God realm. Even a great Buddha in the Yang God realm couldn't do anything about this kind of space tunnel. This was not a matter of finding the source. If it was possible, it could be anywhere in the universe because there were abnormal space connections. In the cultivation world, the stupidest way to solve it was to block or destroy the space tunnel. This was completely meaningless because blocking here didn't mean that the other side would no longer create zombies or abandon the corpses. On the contrary, the corpses might appear in other spaces and cause turbulence. It was better to do it here. At least the king zombie world still knew what to do. This was probably the reason why the initiator dared to abandon the defective zombies casually, because no one could trace it back. Well, there is a way, but it will take a lot of time and effort. I need to report back to the temple and then make a decision. Fellow Taoist Huan Pei, don't worry about it. Buddha is merciful and observant, since it was not done by the king zombie world. And these zombies can be useful under certain circumstances, like the insect swarm this time. It won't be a big problem to use them for the time being. But I want to remind you that the use of zombies should follow humanity and provide good living conditions. You can't easily carry out cruel mutation research on them. Grandmaster, you're right. Wang Zhang would never do something that would incur the wrath of both men and gods. As a cultivator, one must have a bottom line. Even if he did something that would incur the wrath of both the heavens and men, he would not be able to deceive anyone. We all know this. Huan Pei spoke righteously. She had said this countless times in the past 1,000 years. Previously, she had heard it from her master, but now she was saying it herself. In fact, they all had the same meaning. Whether it was Buddhism or Taoism, how could they say that they were incapable? You can't question it now. You have to pretend to believe it. Not only will you satisfy the vanity of the disciples of the big sects, you will also gain benefits and continue to play with zombies. She was a little emotional. She had played with zombies all her life, and now she was actually playing with them. She was really an anomaly. Guangda nodded. This woman was very cunning. She had the unique characteristic of being neither cooked nor cooked, which was not new. Her strength was not good to begin with. If she was not cunning, how could she survive? His impression of this woman was not good from the beginning. Because he cultivated a Buddhist technique, he could clearly sense the movements of cultivators in the area of dual cultivation. Simply put, he could easily sense whether or not a Kuan cultivator had dabbled in the matters between men and women in the recent years. This was not a secret technique that he deliberately practiced to investigate other people's private matters, but a side effect of a secret technique. After he practiced this technique, he had come into contact with many Taoist female Taoists. Naturally, he had some data in this area. Frankly speaking, the Taoist female Taoists were very self-disciplined, especially those with higher realms. They were basically like Jueyu in this aspect. However, Huan Pei was different. She was already a perfected lord, but she still had such sexual activities in recent years. From this, one could see her behavior. He only knew one thing and did not know the other. If he knew that the object of this female Taoist pleasure was actually a zombie, he would probably ask Buddha to be merciful and send her to reincarnation. However, this female Taoist was still tactful. Her attitude was also very humble. She flattered them and tried to be friendly with them, making them unable to do anything. After all, the origin of these zombies really had nothing to do with them. This was also the truth. You can't be dissatisfied just because other people are greedy for pleasure. This is too narrow-minded. Chapter 1470. The King Zombie World's mountains and waters are beautiful. It's truly a blessed land. If it was destroyed by Zerg, we Buddhists would have sinned greatly. Fortunately, fellow cultivators resisted with all their might and protected the safety of mankind. Guangda praised. They were very surprised that the King Zombie World could defend the world. When the Buddhists tried to kill Zerg, several swarms of insects escaped, the largest of which came here. Hundreds of large insects did not have a nest to burden them, nor did they have small insects to take care of. They were all large insects that were yuanying at least, and there were even some monarch insects among them. This kind of power was not something a small world could withstand. How could a small world have a few hundred yuanying? Therefore, when they heard that the insect swarms were attacking the King Zombie World, they did not have much hope. They thought that they were just here to clean up the mess, restore order in the mortal world, and see if they could find the whereabouts of these insects. They did not expect the King Zombie World to be safe and sound. The zombies they raised played a huge role in the insect swarms attack this time. It was hard to imagine that a small world like this could have such powerful combat power. It was not a secret that the King Zombie World raised zombies, but to be able to raise zombies to this extent was a little unbelievable. After they came here, they had carefully observed the zombies that survived. Almost all of them were injured, lying in coffins and ladles as corpses. It was true that they had suffered heavy losses in the battle. The King Zombie World said that more than half of the zombies were dead and injured. The question was, if half of the zombies died, would they be able to stop the insect swarms? This was the answer that Guangda and the others wanted to know. They had been here for several months. They were not here to sightsee. They had a purpose, so they had to know the true strength of this world. After several months, they did not find much. The King Zombie World only had about 10 big cats and small cats that could go out into the universe, and there were only so many zombies. Then, where was the hidden strength? Relying on the months of contact, Guangda pretended to ask the question in his heart unintentionally. From what I know, there are a few large insects in this swarm, and they're all primordial spirit cultivators. This was confirmed in their previous revenge. It's not that I'm doubting the strength of your king zombies, but I'm afraid they are not strong enough to deal with these nascent divinity insect beasts. Guangda's words were very polite, but Huan Pei knew that she had to answer. Otherwise, there would be no point in showing goodwill at the beginning. Fortunately, she had already made preparations. In addition, just in case, she had also sent someone to inform Ali. Based on her current schedule, she would be back in a few days. I'll let you know that if we only use these zombies to fight, the king zombies would indeed have a slim chance of survival. However, the heavens took pity on us and didn't destroy us king zombies. Just before the invasion of the insect swarm, One of the old zombies mutated and comprehended the legendary Emperor Zombie. With this zombie around, he fought bitterly in the battle and barely managed to kill a few primordial spirit insects. But he also suffered heavy injuries. Guangdo was surprised. Oh, an Emperor Zombie? I have only heard of his name, but have never seen him in person. I don't know where this zombie is right now. May I disturb you to take a look? Huan Pei heaved a long sigh. To tell you the truth, this zombie has already left the king zombie, and its whereabouts are unknown. I'm afraid the master can't bear to see it. Guangda's face was filled with regret. I missed it. What a pity. Since it was injured, it must have found a cave in the universe to heal itself in silence. With the habits of zombies, I'm afraid it won't be seen for hundreds or thousands of years. Huan Pei disdained in her heart. These monks had no good intentions. If there was really such a zombie, she didn't know what kind of bad ideas it would have. Unfortunately, my skills are better. I have my own cave, which can be hidden and nourished by my heart. The old bald donkey wants to see it, but I'm afraid he won't have the luck. Who doesn't want to own such a strange creature? Unfortunately, the master also knows that once a zombie enters the Emperor realm, it will have spiritual intelligence, and it can't be kept by means of tricks. In the world of Emperor zombies, if they are strong, no one can stop them. Since it is a benevolent zombie, it is better to let it go. Maybe there will be a chance to see it again. So, although the sect hasn't made this matter public and only said that it went to the astronomical phenomenon area to become a zombie, it is just to appease the mood of the cultivators below. You know, it is better to say that if there is an insect swarm attacking again, how will they have the will to fight? Guangda nodded to show his understanding. This was common knowledge in the world of cultivation. Powerful creatures would never be enslaved by other species. This was the nature of creatures' freedom. In the past few months, they had also heard about this matter. Now it seemed that it was probably the truth, and Huan Pei really didn't need to lie to them. An emperor zombie was a creature that couldn't be controlled at all. How could it be used to lie? The foreshadowing was enough. It was time to talk about business. It's like this. The insect swarm is boundless, and no one can really find out their behavior, where they go, where they attack. The king zombie has already suffered once, and there can't be a second time. Since this matter started with Buddhism, it should end with Buddhism. Our idea is to set up a temple in the king zombie for communication purposes. When there is an insect swarm attacking, the alarm will be sent out, and we can arrive in the shortest time possible. What do you think, fellow Taoist? Huan Pei was furious, but she didn't show it on her face. Did they think she was stupid? What was the point of setting up a temple in the king zombie? If they only relied on communication, how long would the reinforcements arrive? A few years or a dozen years? If they really waited until the reinforcements arrived, the king zombies, would be reincarnated and could do nothing, unless there were more than 10 Buddhists stationed here. How could that be possible? The reason why they made such a suggestion was nothing more than wanting to set up a Buddhist orthodoxy here. After a few hundred years, with the abnormal spreading ability of Buddhism, the king zombies really didn't need to worry about the insect swarm attacking, because they would all be swallowed by Buddhism. The so-called rescue was just an excuse. However, she couldn't refuse directly. She could only delay. Then she would release the emperor zombie in her cave. She made up her mind. Master, what you said is exactly what I want. With Buddhism setting up a temple here, not to mention Zerg, other orthodoxies wouldn't dare to cause trouble here. The king zombie world will be peaceful from now on, enjoying the glory of the golden age. But I'm ashamed to say that although our sect is small, it also has a small problem, and that is that we can't monopolize the orders. We have to discuss it with everyone, so that we won't spoil each other's relationship. You see, let me gather my disciples, and we will have a conclusion in a few months' time. Huan Pei promises that we won't let you down. Guangda and the other two didn't agree, but there was nothing they could do. It was indeed like this in small sects, unlike their orthodoxies, where regardless of whether you agree or not, you have to carry out the orders. Small sects were different. With more than 10 people, they were basically on the same line as master and disciple, so they could only discuss it. This was also the truth. Anyway, they had already been delayed here for a few months, so it didn't matter if it took a few more months. For the Buddhas, a year's time was just a snap of the fingers. Fine, you guys can discuss it. We will go to the celestial phenomenon in a few days' time to see what's so special about it, that it can actually transform an ordinary zombie into an emperor zombie. Chapter 1471. Leaving aside the fact that the three monks were preparing to head to sky beyond phenomena, Huan Pei returned to the mountain gate. At this moment, she had already received the news of her disciple's return. She found a reason to send her disciple away and went directly to the manor. It was not that she was impatient, but it was related to the future of the king zombie. She really had no way to deal with it alone, so she could only place her hopes on this mysterious emperor zombie. She wondered if the hair of the emperor zombie had been smooth after washing his hair these days. That night, Huan Pei used all her skills. The two of them fought several times and were exhausted. Countless cracks appeared on the huge, luxurious coffin after the battle. Huan Pei looked at him from the corner of her eyes. "Emperor Zombie, have I paid off the debt of spitting on the back of your neck?" Lu Xiaoyi stretched and said with a smile, "How can this debt be paid off? Interest, 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 there is no end. Let's leave it for the future. I will leave after a short rest. Whether we can meet again in the future, that is destined by the heavens." Huan Pei did not expect that after everything was done, before she even opened her mouth, this emperor zombie wanted to escape. But she also knew that there might be something else, so she just stared at him, wanting to see how ruthless this person's heart could be. Did he really become a zombie after pretending to be a zombie for a long time? Lu Xiaoyi sighed. "I already know about the matter of those monks. Don't worry, after I leave, I will naturally take care of it properly. No monk in the king zombie world would dare to set up a temple here. This is my promise." Huan Pei said softly, "Don't act recklessly, killing people casually. Do you think the Buddhists can kill all of them? Or do you recognize them?" Lu Xiaoyi sneered. "They're all monks from the Heaven's Choice continent. I don't recognize them either. But I have my methods. I won't kill indiscriminately. It is better to get it done once and for all. Do you know why the remnants of the insect swarm are wreaking havoc everywhere? This is simply Heaven's Choice Buddhism's deliberate actions on the battlefield. Chasing these insects swarm everywhere. They follow behind to express goodwill, rescue, and set up a temple, not only to gain reputation, but also to gain benefits. It is really killing three birds with one stone." Huan Pei nodded. "I also have a rough guess, but I can't prove it. Would a Buddhist sect take a fancy to a place like ours?" Lu Xiaoyi smiled. "Cast the net wide, catch more fish, and choose the best. The king zombie is not necessarily a necessary place for them. It's just that after the great battle, they feel that it would be easier to set up a temple here." Lu Xiaoyi leaped into the air and put on a robe. He said emotionally, "This Taoist robe is very meaningful. I will keep it with me. It's a souvenir." Huan Peishing's eyes were bewildered. "You won't even tell me your name before you leave?" Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. "Believe me, knowing my name is a bad thing for you." Just as he was about to float out, he stopped and took out a jade slip from his ring. "These days, I've had nothing to do. I was touched by the substitution of zombies this time. So, I wrote a miscellaneous diary for you as a memento. I'll leave it for you. Perhaps, in the future, you'll update it for me." While he was talking, he had already disappeared. Feeling disappointed and frustrated, Huan Pei took the jade slip and saw a line of words at the top, carrying a water curtain cave with him. What the F***CK was written on it. "It's neither fish nor fowl." Lu Xiaoyi stood in the void, quietly waiting for the three monks of Heaven's Choice to come out. He knew that they were going to explore the turbulent weather phenomenon. This was something that every cultivator would not let go of when they arrived at a new place. There was no difference in Tao orthodoxy, no difference in cultivation level. It was just that the direction of their research was different and the depth of their research varied. He had finished his cultivation here, so of course, he had to embark on the return journey and leave a memorable memory in the process of cultivation. On this point, Huan Pei was much more sophisticated than Ali. Entertainment was entertainment, but he didn't want to cause any harm to innocent people. It was harmful to others and not beneficial to himself. If it really made people's state of mind fluctuate, it would be the consequence of his cynicism. He was not angry about what the Buddhists did, because this was the world of cultivation. You couldn't be angry at all. They were everywhere, not only the Buddhists, but also the Taoists. Together, they formed the grievances of the world of cultivation. For millions of years, it had never changed. Even if the future era changed, it would still not change. It was impossible to kill all of these people, and they would only bring trouble to Wang Jiang. There was a very interesting orthodoxy here, and a very interesting water curtain cave. It gave him comfort when he was lonely during his travels. He had the obligation to protect it well. A few days later, 3 breaths came from the front. Lu Xiaoyi moved and was already in front of them. In the void of the universe, the possibility of cultivators fighting against each other was very small. It was just like the collisions of aircrafts in his previous life. Usually, as long as they met, it would be because one side wanted to, and it was malicious. Monk Guangde and the other 2 quickly discovered the breaths. It was human, Taoist, and unscrupulous. Their zodiac sign was crab. The mentality of humans was so strange. If they just brushed past each other, they would very likely harass such a passerby. They wouldn't fight to the death, but they wouldn't let them go either. But if the other party came straight at them without any scruples, they would have to consider the reason behind it. Maybe it was fierce Wu Ji, or there were companions behind him. They slightly changed their direction, and when the other party appeared in their line of sight, their hearts skipped a beat. Oh no, it's the 5th ring swordsman. They had all participated in Zhou Xian's chess battle and Marine Masters. They were no stranger to this 5th ring swordsman. One of them had even met him in the demonic realm before. Because of his caution, he managed to escape from the nightmare of flying swords. Such a person was very difficult to deal with in the void. They knew that they were no match for him, so they subconsciously shrank into a ball, hoping that this fierce person was just passing by and wouldn't treat them as his mortal enemy outside of the chess game. Their hopes were dashed because the swordsman was obviously coming for them. But before their hopes were completely dashed, the swordsman was the first to speak, but he didn't draw his sword. This slowed them down a little. Hey, you 3 monks, why are you running so fast? This young master has a few words to ask. I wonder if the 3 of you can give me some face? Logically speaking, with their current strength, they had no choice but to stop. Guangde chuckled and flattered them. So, it's Xian Yuan swordsman, Lu swordsman. How fortunate to meet you in the void. It's fate that brought us together. Let's talk about our parting. Lu Xiaoyi laughed and scolded. I hate to hear you Buddhists say that it's fate. You Buddhists say that people become monks when they hear it, and worlds become Buddhists when they hear it. Do you mean that the entire universe is fated with you Buddhists? Guangde's expression didn't change, and his heart didn't skip a beat. Swordsman Lu's foundation is too great. We Buddhists can't tolerate it. What advice do you have for us this time? On Zhou Xian's chessboard, each has its own master. When walking in the void, we should follow ancient rules. Since we're old friends, we should tell you everything we know. Lu Xiaoyi went straight to the point. The void pests are inexhaustible, and there's no end to them. You Buddhists don't do things cleanly, leaving behind a bunch of debts after killing a swarm of insects. I'm here to track down the swarm. Do you have any news? Chapter 1472. When Guangde heard this, he relaxed. For swordsmen, this was what they loved to do the most. He wasn't surprised at all. Good news, fellow Taoist, is that a swarm of insects has already been exterminated in the King's Zombie. We also followed them here, but we were a step too late. As for the other small insect swarms, the universe is vast, and we don't have any accurate information. Lu Xiaoyi casually said, You Buddhists have run to the back again? In the long run, I don't think you need to fight. You could just follow behind and sacrifice the souls of the dead. I've also been to several nearby regions. I heard that Heaven's Choice wants to set up a temple here to send messages. Let's not beat around the bush. You might be able to fool others, but you won't be able to fool me. Are you trying to take advantage of the fact that everyone in this region is in danger? Let me say this first. If you do this, don't be afraid of inviting trouble. Whether it's the Taoists or Buddhists of the origin world, I'm afraid they won't tolerate your actions. I heard that Buddhists are merciful. Exterminating the insect swarms is your duty, so why are you plundering other people's territories? Guangda secretly complained in his heart. If this matter were spread out, he would definitely not be able to do it. Who would have thought that he would meet this living ancestor in such a remote place? However, things like setting up a temple and establishing a Taoist orthodoxy were not limited to a certain region. If this vicious person set his eyes on this region, then he would just have to set up a temple. The universe was vast, so how could he take care of everything? Thus, he went with the flow. Of course not. Fellow Taoist, don't misunderstand my words. We will be patrolling the nearby region, but we won't be establishing a Taoist orthodoxy. Please be at ease. In any case, fellow Taoist is also nearby. Whether it's true or not, we won't be able to hide it from you. Lu Xiaoyi revealed a faint smile. Fine, I'll believe you this time. I heard that the King Zombie is amazing, so I was just about to take a look. I wonder if the three Grandmasters are interested? Guangda hurriedly waved his hand. We won't delay, fellow Taoist, any longer. We just came out of King Zombie, and we're about to patrol another area. Yu Gao Zhou Chong, we will meet again someday. The four of them went their separate ways. Guangda and the other two didn't bother with the swordsman anymore. They were afraid that the swordsman would hear something from the Wangjiang and cause trouble for them, so they went to other places. Lu Xiaoyi naturally wouldn't go back to the Wangjiang either. No one knew about this. Both sides were scheming against each other, but in this area, the Buddhists also paid less attention. It wasn't that they were afraid of the swordsman, but that they didn't want to become enemies with Xianyuan and the Fifth Ring before the situation was clear. It was unwise. Ali was very depressed because she lost the only legendary level Emperor Zombie since the establishment of the sect. Moreover, he had lost it for no apparent reason. She was, after all, a Yuanying. Slowly, she began to realize that something was amiss. However, the zombies had already been lost, so there was no way to verify it. As time passed, she gradually forgot about it. In the end, it was just a zombie. Huan Pei was different. She knew the truth, so she was always worried. She wasn't worried about the swarm of insects, but worried that the Buddhists would return. In the face of such a large force, King Zombie had no right to say no. She only hoped that the dead man wouldn't speak empty words for the sake of their past intimacy. However, she couldn't think of any other method that a Taoist could use to persuade the Buddhists to give up other than using violence. This couldn't be the personal wish of a certain monk, but the overall strategy of the Buddhists. It wasn't something that could be easily changed with a few words. Not to mention a Yin soul, true monarch. Even if a Yang soul, true monarch spoke, the Buddhists would back down. This kind of worry slowly dissipated with the passage of time. She was surprised to find that after several years, Guangda and the other two seemed to have disappeared from the world. Her fellow disciples who went to the Wangjiang also reported that there were no monks comprehending the heavenly phenomenon there. What was the reason for them to leave so quietly? It must be related to the Emperor Zombie, but how did he do it? This question had always lingered in Huan Pei's mind, and she had never forgotten it. She didn't want her young disciple to fall into this trap, but she didn't expect that she was actually not that strong. In her life, she had two men. The first was her Taoist companion when she was in the Zhuji phase, but even Jean Dan didn't make it. This Emperor Zombie was the second. Her experience wasn't as bad as her performance made out to be. It was purely because of the accidental incontinence in that battle. This kind of question didn't have an answer until more than 10 years later. A true monarch from a nearby small world came to visit and talked about the old incident from 10 years ago. Do you know why the Buddhists finally left this airspace? Why didn't they build a temple in several worlds? Because more than 10 years ago, a Taoist who passed by warned them. So in order to avoid trouble, the Buddhists took the initiative to give up this airspace. Huan Pei pretended to be careless. Oh, there's such a thing? A Taoist warned the Buddhists? Senior Marshal Brother, this is a bit too much. Do you think there's such an existence in all the worlds in the nearby universe, including the first world in Zhou? The true monarch shook his head and then nodded. In theory, there shouldn't be, but in fact, there really is. Think about the cultivation war in Zhou 30 years ago. There's also the interracial war in the Five Rings even further away. This Taoist is related to these. With the passage of time, the legends of the past were further fermenting. When the cultivators gathered together, those who could take out the Dragon Gate array couldn't be separated from this specious news. After all, this was the most famous cultivation war in the main world. Although the Emperor Zombie was remote, it wasn't too far away from Zhou. There were always people who liked to travel, and there were always people who liked to brag. Being satisfied with the surprised gazes of others was also a kind of enjoyment. There was never a lack of such people in life, not only in the mortal world, but also in the cultivation world. Just like this true monarch friend of Huan Pei, he was such a nosy person in this airspace. It was also a kind of illness, but it wasn't easy to cure, because what he liked the most was to occupy a high position alone and be surrounded by the curious and surprised gazes of the surrounding cultivators. This gave him great satisfaction in his heart. He kept them in suspense until the cultivators in the Emperor Zombie were somewhat unable to restrain themselves. Only then did he pretend to speak calmly and casually. There is such a cultivator. He looks very young. He only has Yin spirit cultivation. He was born in the 5th ring Xianyuan sword vein, and then he studied in Zhou for several hundred years. He joined forces with the Heaven's Choice rebels, raided the 5th ring, slaughtered the monk army, annihilated Zerg, and battled the winged people. Then he single-handedly killed his way back to Zhou. One person was able to stop 100,000 soldiers, causing the Heaven's Choice continent to return empty-handed. He raised the might of the main world. You should have heard of this person, right? Ali was like a chick pecking at rice. I've heard of him. It was you who personally came to tell us about him over 10 years ago. The true monarch was somewhat embarrassed. It seemed that he had been running around a bit too frequently during this period of time. It was no longer fresh. He had to be more careful in the future. It's this person, the swordsman called Lu Xiaoyi. Over 10 years ago, he passed by your King Zombie world and met those 3 monks by chance. He directly set down the rules and forbade them from using Zerg to threaten Li Ji Temple. This is the real reason why the monks disappeared. He has the backing of a super extreme world like the 5th ring Zhou, and he himself has a powerful private army. The Heaven's Choice still has to consider his words, but it has nothing to do with his realm. Huan Pei was somewhat absent-minded. She had heard of this person long ago, and it wasn't just from the mouth of one person. This kind of proud son of heaven, the trendsetter of the era, was simply not in the same cultivation world as her. They were completely unrelated. There was no possibility of their paths intersecting. But who would have thought that when she opened the water curtain cave by chance, such a golden Wawa would come in? Thinking about how that person was tormented in the coffin, she couldn't help but laugh. No wonder he only used his feet to kick people. It was because he didn't dare to use the real thing. It was too recognizable. He was right. King Zombie shouldn't have known his name. King Zombie couldn't handle this kind of implication. He even gave her a book of miscellaneous notes. Pooh! What kind of plaything was he writing? He didn't dare to write in a formal setting, but secretly wrote pornographic books in private. He was also a pervert with an abnormal mentality. Chapter 1473. In the void of the universe, a flock of geese flew over from afar. The geese in the void were different from the geese in the mortal world. In fact, in the mortal world, geese were just a literary name for ordinary geese to show how far they could fly. Geese passed on letters. Fish passed on to a ruler. It was just a kind of artistic process. The geese in the void of the universe were the real geese. They were demonic beasts that stood at a higher position in the pyramid of demonic beasts. They were actually a variation of the Great Pang's bloodline, just like how the peacock's bloodline was inherited from the phoenix. They had a great background and a great background. It was just that their bloodline was not as noble as that of the immemorial beasts. This large space was no longer under the control of humans. It was the size of dozens of universes. In fact, in this place, there was no strict distinction between the so-called universes. This was because the demonic beasts did not pay much attention to this. They were even too lazy to give a name. Whoever occupied it would be given the name of that person. This kind of space was not rare in the void of the universe. In fact, in a strict sense, it was far more than the space occupied by humans. After all, in the universe, there were the real natives. This was the world of demonic beasts. The immemorial beasts' bloodline inheritance. Demonic beasts, void beasts, yes, including Zerg. Of course, just like how they were not welcomed in the human world, Zerg was also not welcomed here. Because of their terrifying reproductive ability, any race would feel threatened. Zerg was a beast. Immemorial beasts were rare and lived in seclusion. Therefore, in this barren space to humans, it was the world of demonic beasts and void beasts. Correspondingly, they were also the two most opposite species. In the eyes of humans, wasn't this killing each other? But in the eyes of demonic beasts, they were completely different. Just like how demonic beasts looked at humans, they still beat humans until their brains turned into dog brains. It was the same logic. The biggest competition was not the competition between selling white flour and steamed buns, but the competition between selling white flour and selling lime. This was an ocean of demonic beasts. They lived and grew here. They rarely went to the human world because humans were too cunning. Similarly, human cultivators rarely came here because demonic beasts were too bloody. But this did not mean that humans and demonic beasts were complete opposites. Just like how demonic beasts were often treated as friends in the human world, the demonic beasts here did not necessarily want to kill humans as soon as they saw them. Demonic beasts also treated humans as friends, hoping to learn some non-instinctive and acquired knowledge from them. In short, those who looked similar but were not of the same race were the true enemies. Those who looked completely different and were not of the same race were easier to accept. This was the inexplicable exclusivity of living creatures. There were a total of 13 geese in this flock, and they were arranged in a standard formation. In the atmosphere, this arrangement was very aerodynamic, but in the void, it was completely meaningless. It was more of a kind of deterrence, a kind of ritual of traveling. Among the primordial beasts, the Great Pung was the one that paid the most attention when traveling. Thus, it had inherited this bad habit in its bloodline. It didn't matter if it flew fast or not, but it had to fly beautifully. This was the most important. This flock of demonic beasts flew beautifully. The only flaw was that beside the leading demonic goose, there was a small demonic goose that did not match the other demonic beasts. Demonic beasts were called demonic beasts not only because they could fly far, but also because of their huge size. An adult demonic goose had a wingspan of 300 feet. However, this strange demonic goose only had a wingspan of 30 feet. It was even smaller than a newborn demonic goose. Taking a closer look, it looked like a wingman, because its main body had a standard human face. From head to toe, it had all the body parts of a human, including the muttering ball in the middle. Taking a closer look, it was not a wingman, because it had no feathers. Moreover, its wings seemed to be fake. They were flapping very unnaturally. Demonic goose. These wings are not right. Is there anything bigger and more majestic? It would be best if the colors were more gorgeous. The kind that would have 5-colored auspicious clouds when you flap them. The demonic beasts of demonic beasts were still chattering. The leading demonic goose was helpless. You should be content. This pair of wings of yours is made up of dozens of feathers from each demonic goose. If you really make them bigger and more majestic, you will be satisfied. I will become a bald chicken. Another demonic goose cackled. Our demonic goose race only has 2 colors. black and white. Demonic beasts of demonic beasts. If you want to be prettier, you can color it yourself. However, you will not be able to fly with the effect of 5-colored auspicious clouds. If you want the effect of auspicious clouds, you can ask the peacock race when you have the chance to meet them. See if they are willing to pluck their feathers for you. A flock of demonic geese jeered. The peacock race cherished their feathers the most. Not to mention dozens of feathers to make up his wings. They would not even give him a single feather. Lu Xiaoyi and this flock of demonic geese met in a large-scale astronomical phenomenon. To cultivators, not only would humans deliberately run into large-scale astronomical phenomena to seek stimulation, but demonic beasts also love to do so. Especially the demonic geese who love to fly. They used flying in large-scale astronomical phenomena as a way to train their abilities. Just like how sea swallows loved to fly in storms, this was their instinct. However, their instincts could also sometimes harm others. This flock of demonic geese fell into trouble when the astronomical phenomenon changed drastically. Those who drowned would always be able to swim, and those who died from flying would not be able to escape because they could fly. Lu Xiaoyi also comprehended the Tao realm in the astronomical phenomenon. By chance, he gathered a group of demonic geese. One of them had theoretical knowledge, while the other had instinctive divine abilities. They supported each other and flew out without losing a single one. The demonic geese were very straightforward. They belonged to the species that did not dislike humans. Moreover, they had a natural instinct for good and evil. Gradually, they gathered together and became familiar with each other. Lu Xiaoyi even dressed himself up as a demonic goose and enjoyed himself. They flew in the same direction. They were happy to travel together because there was a talkative human. Flying was no longer boring. Actually, we can change the formation. There are many other choices besides the demonic goose formation. Long snake formation, square formation, circle formation, contract formation, knife formation, etc. There are too many. How about one person carries the other 12 and fly? We can all take turns. The others can even take a nap. Lu Xiaoyi always had countless bad ideas. However, the demonic geese were stubborn. Perhaps all demonic beasts were like this. They were unwilling to change and were more inclined to respect tradition. The leader of the demonic geese rejected him without any hesitation. No, our formation is not just for flying to look good. It also contains an offensive formation. When there is a chance, I will let you experience our demonic geese feather storm. Then you will understand the meaning of flying like this. Lu Xiaoyi was disdainful. I don't see it. If we change the formation, will we not be able to release the demonic geese feather storm? The only advantage of flying like this is that whoever shits in front will not suffer. Chapter 1474. The flock of geese had long gotten used to this human's weird way of thinking. In their eyes, humans were all monsters, and sooner or later, they would be tormented by their own thoughts and turn into lunatics. But this didn't mean that they hated this human. On the contrary, they felt that this human was a very interesting lunatic. Lu Xiaoyi was enjoying himself. He felt very relaxed when he was with the flock of geese. Everyone was traveling together, exploring the celestial phenomena together, adventuring together, searching for instinctive happiness together, and cursing at each other as they cooperated. You call me an idiot, I call you trash. He really became a member of the flock of geese. This was what he thought, and the flock of geese also thought so, at least on this journey together. Regarding the ancient cosmic phenomena, the demon beasts had their own intuition and instinctive understanding. They might not be able to explain everything, and they might not be able to come up with a theoretical conclusion, but they could always find the correct way to deal with the countless complicated changes. In this kind of journey, not only the celestial phenomena were his teachers, but so were the geese. He also had the profound understanding of the human sages, and his basic understanding of the innate Tao. With such a foundation, his learning efficiency was much faster than the average person who comprehended the 5 ties. Among the 36 innate Taos, the 5 ties was the most boring and uninteresting. It was also the great Tao that couldn't be directly reflected in battle. If the 36 innate Taos were to be compared to a scientific system, then the Taos such as fate, morality, time, space, and cause and effect belonged to the mysterious system of the innate Taos. They were lofty symbols. Slaughter, destruction, 5 elements, yin and yang, thunder, strength, and so on belonged to the application system. Using his understanding in the future, countless applications could be derived from them: Tai Yi, Tai Chu, Tai Shi, Tai Su, Tai Chi, primal chaos, and so on were the basic theoretical system. Just like in the technological society of his previous life, people tended to favor the application system that could easily produce results and earn a lot of money, and were unwilling to work on the basic theories. Being eager for quick success and instant benefits was not the privilege of ordinary mortals. It was the same for cultivators as well. Everyone understood the importance of basic research. It was the cornerstone of how high a building could be built. However, if one were to ask a specific person to spend his entire life on this kind of foundation, to lay the foundation for other people's cultivation, to build stairs, at present, there were very few cultivators who were pure like this. They were so few that it was almost negligible. Everyone was like a swarm of bees that threw themselves into the application of basic research, just to produce results faster and see results. Lu Xiaoyi, because of his own cultivation needs, because of the coincidence when he became a nascent soul, and because of his desire for grandiose achievements, he forcefully linked his growth process with the development and changes of the universe. Perhaps he could indeed avoid the 2 more familiar systems of the debilitating state to become an immortal and the ancient method of cutting the corpse to become an immortal, but he had set up a new system for himself. Everything had to be explored by himself. His method was a one-off method that could only be encountered by chance. The key to its feasibility was the change of epochs. If he missed this period and wanted to rely on the changes of the universe to promote his realm growth, it would be a joke. Speaking of which, if the epoch didn't change and the world didn't change, how many years would a human like you need to live and die with the universe? Even if you added hundreds and thousands of generations of your descendants, it wouldn't be enough. Therefore, when he returned to the 5th ring, he left his swordplate technique at the dome, but didn't mention a word about his path of ascension. It was because his method didn't need to be spread and couldn't be replicated. If he casually took it out, it would mislead the younger generation. In the past few years, he had also entered several celestial phenomena and followed the great geese to pretend to be wild geese. The only bad thing was that these geese, who relied entirely on instinct, didn't seek to understand the Tao state. They flew in, circled around a few times, and then flew away. They were different from humans in the process of thinking. You mother of asterisker, can't you just stand here and take a closer look at it? It's like someone is urging you to die. The brains of you great geese are as short as your intestines. From your mouth to your ass, it's a straight path. Once good things come in, you can't digest them all. It's a pity that you're born with such talent. Lu Xiaoyi was extremely vicious. Wild Goose King didn't show any weakness. Damn you. You humans have long intestines, but it's because you have too many twists and turns. A simple principle becomes a mess when it comes to you. Is there a need for that? In the end, what you think of and add on are all hypocrisy, complications, and pompous. A good Tao has been turned into a crooked path by you guys. The 5 manifestations of Khanate can be turned into too white, too big, too tight, too soft, too watery. Tell me, what are you thinking? Lu Xiaoyi liked the great geese. One of the biggest reasons was that they liked to bicker and could take a joke. This was a very good quality, at least to him. Such a journey wouldn't be lonely. Cultivation was one aspect of a journey. Learning was another aspect, and meeting different people along the way was another aspect. All of these aspects added up to a perfect journey of cultivation. His journey would last for 1,000 years, and he wouldn't be as stupid as Qing Xian, exiling himself like an ascetic monk. That wasn't cultivation, that was self-abuse. Judging from his state of mind, how good could the effects of cultivation be? His journey of cultivation should be colorful, such as pretending to be a zombie or a guest. As they flew, Lu Xiaoyi started to yell again. Wild Goose King, you seem to be going in the wrong direction. Don't bully me, because I'm not familiar with this place. As long as I'm in the starry sky, I can find the right way even with my eyes closed. Wild Goose King laughed. Haha, you're so smart. How can you notice such a small change? Is this the experience of being tricked by people in the human world? You're right. We're going to take a detour to join a gathering of beasts. Some of our friends are in trouble, and we need to help them. Why are you scared? If you're scared, you can go on your own. No one's forcing you. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Have you heard of a swordsman who's afraid of trouble? I'm not afraid of trouble, but I'm afraid that if I kill too many people, I'll drag your great geese down. Let me say this in advance. Once I start fighting, I don't care about anything else. Don't blame me for being ruthless. Wild Goose King didn't care. Of course, it knew that the human swordsman's orthodoxy was good at killing, and they were one of the best among the human cultivators. However, in the space of the beast territory, which Beast Clan wasn't bloodthirsty, if the human cultivators liked to fight here, then they must have come to the wrong place. The Battle of the Five Rings, the Battle of Zhou Xian, had a profound impact on the human world. As time passed, it began to spread, but no matter how much it spread, it couldn't reach the space of the beast territory. This place and the human world of cultivation were two different worlds. Humans never cared about this place, just like how they didn't care about the internal strife of humans. Chapter 1475. Lu Xiaoyi didn't ask any more questions. It was just a detour. To him, there was no harm in seeing more demonic beasts, not to mention danger. It was just like a demonic beast appearing in a human gathering. No one would care about it. After millions of years of cultivation, it was impossible for all races to integrate, but the communication between each other was real. Unless a large number of human cultivators appeared in the beast territory, or a large group of demonic beasts appeared in the human airspace, it would attract extra attention. The beast territory's airspace was not a place where one could kill anyone on sight. Just like the human airspace, the demonic beasts were allowed to travel freely. This was a great era of cultivation. As they bickered and teased, more demonic beasts appeared in their sight. Lu Xiaoyi asked, "What conflict? Is it with the void beasts?" Yanjun laughed. "You don't understand the beast territory. Here, we are mortal enemies with the void beasts. If we fight with the void beasts, it will be a war, not a helping hand. It will be a conflict between demonic beasts. You know, there are many groups among us demonic beasts, just like you humans." Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. "You don't learn the good stuff, but you learn quickly by forming groups." Yanjun glared at him and said, "We are not trying to form a gang. The relationship between demonic beasts is actually very simple. It is basically determined by blood. If the blood is similar, then the relationship is needless to say. If the blood is unrelated, then it is hard to say. For example, the race we're going to help comes from the supreme existence of the immemorial sacred beasts, the phoenix. As for us, our blood comes from another supreme existence of the immemorial sacred beast, the great rock. Among the immemorial sacred beasts, the phoenix and the great rock have a different status. As their bloodline inheritance, we demonic beasts have a special status." Lu Xiaoyi's heart skipped a beat. The bloodline inheritance of the phoenix? Is it a peacock? Yanjun nodded. "At least you are knowledgeable. It is a peacock. How about it? It is not a loss to take a detour this time, right? You will never see a phoenix, but peacocks are also rare among the demonic beasts. Don't you want a pair of cool wings? Why don't you ask them? Maybe they'll give you a pair?" This was a joke. No one could pluck the feathers from a peacock's body unless they were willing. However, this race was exceptionally arrogant. They were even more narcissistic than the great rocks. How could they easily satisfy the request of an incompetent human? Lu Xiaoyi was a little excited. "Yanjun, you have a long neck and small eyes. You don't have a good eye for people. What knowledge? Do you think I've never seen a peacock? Let me tell you, I have a lot of peacock friends. Have you heard of the Smoke Peacock clan? The Wild Goose King was taken aback. It had to admit that this guy had his ways. He was a country bumpkin who had seen the world. You actually know about the Smoke Peacock? Impressive, you have some knowledge. Do you know how many branches the Peacock clan is divided into? Lu Xiaoyi said casually. I was just about to ask. Yanjun was very familiar with it. Phoenixes and elephants have 5 colors. The red one is the phoenix, the yellow one is the taowu, the green one is the luan, the purple one is the taowu, and the white one is the swan. Among them, the one with the strongest ability, the one who could rise from the flames and descend with fate in hand, was the phoenix. But in reality, there are 5 different types, and their abilities are different. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. There are 5 siblings. One of them is the son of the first wife and has a noble bloodline. The other 4 are the children of concubines, born of a mistress. Is that right? The Wild Goose King could not continue. This explanation was very vulgar, but it was also very vivid. It basically explained the Phoenix clan. Among them, the Phoenix clan was loved by all. Whether it was their own ability, inherited bloodline, or the power of their clan, they were all orthodox. The others were a little less interesting. Yes, they were the children of concubines who were not liked by others. It could only continue. Since there are 5 types, their bloodlines will naturally be passed down to 5 types. The descendants of the Phoenix are called the Red Peacock clan. The descendants of the Luan are called the Green Peacock clan. The descendants of the Taowu are called the Yellow Peacock clan. The descendants of the Swan clan are called the Purple Peacock clan. The descendants of the Swan clan are called the White Peacock clan. Do you understand what I'm saying? Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. No, I don't understand. You've been talking for so long. Where's the Smoke Peacock clan? Could it be that they are the illegitimate children? The Wild Goose King was stunned. This person's poisonous mouth was right. You can't say that they are illegitimate children, right? Because the status of the phoenix and the roc is too special among the primordial sacred beasts. Their descendants must be conferred by the immortal court. For example, the descendants of the phoenix who have been conferred the title are the Red Peacock clan. Those who haven't are the Smoke Peacock clan. The difference is actually just the name. In fact, they are the same. In a human world, maybe illegitimate children are more loved? Lu Xiaoyi sneered. What kind of logic is that? I've never heard of it. In a human world, illegitimate children are bullied because their family background is not strong enough, and because they don't have an official title. Well, one is in the family planning system, and the other is outside the family planning system. Can't they just pay a fine and make up a household registration? Why do they have to make such a clear distinction? The Immortal Court has nothing better to do. By the way, which unit of the Immortal Court is in charge of this? The Wild Goose King was speechless. I'm not familiar with the Immortal Court. You only know how to ask all these nonsensical questions. By the way, where's I just now? Lu Xiaoyi was even more speechless. You old bird, you haven't told me which peacock clan you are going to help. The Wild Goose King laughed. It's the Green Peacock clan. They have lived here all their lives. They have never left. Lu Xiaoyi was very curious. Then, where do the other peacock clans usually live? Or do they have no fixed residence? The Wild Goose King snorted. How would I know where they live? I have never been out of this area. Anyway, the 6 peacock clans should each have their own place. They are more arrogant and like to be alone. They can't get along with other clans. Yes, the more noble the clan is, the more they are like this. They are solitary and silent. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. The Wild Goose King, your background is not low either. I don't see that silence is golden. They're just a bunch of chatterboxes. By the way, even a noble clan like the Peacock is divided into 5 or 6 clans. What about the Roc clan? It can't be just the Great Goose clan, right? The Wild Goose King was very proud. The Roc clan's bloodline has many branches. Besides us, there are the Golden Eagle, the Crossing Gull, the Flying Bird, the Taowu, the Minjing, the Spotted Wu, and so on. There are dozens of them. I can't tell you all at once. You only need to know that there are many more of them than the peacock clans. But in this area, there are only the green peacock clan and the great goose clan. Lu Xiaoyi came to a conclusion. That can only mean that your ancestor, the rock, has a messy, private life. He is really not picky about food. You're talking about those with close bloodlines. If you include those with distant bloodlines, are all the winged ones the descendants of the rock clan? Chapter 1476. The flock of geese was approaching, and at the same time, there were also many demonic beasts rushing over here. They were neither friendly nor distant, and Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. Goose King, so I figured out that only you swan geese and green peacocks are on the same side, and the rest are your enemies? Liao asked. This is not a good fight. I say you should just admit defeat. Don't make the crowd angry. Lu Xiaoyi's words touched Yanjun's heart. Because the two races thought highly of themselves, they did not have any affinity with other beasts in this beast territory. They thought they were born noble and superior, so they ordered others around. When something really happened, other than the two races helping each other, no other races would step forward to help them. The green peacock race had a good character. They never took advantage of other races. They were just a little arrogant. Such a character was not easy to get along with, so they attacked together. Of course, it was not the kind of attack that would kill all of them. Although they were all demonic beasts, they still had a basic sense of propriety. In the beast tide, they would fight with their fists. This was the most popular way to solve conflicts in the beast territory. Therefore, the geese flew slowly and were not in a hurry. Because of the ancient rules of demonic beasts, the peacock race was not in danger of extinction. Along the way, Yanjun introduced them to him. What kind of demonic beasts were they? Where did they come from? What kind of great demonic beasts were they? Where did they come from? This bloodline was a little mixed, that magical power was not worth mentioning, and so on. Hearing this, Lu Xiaoyi was somewhat amused. This was a typical example of arrogance. When facing humans, they could still maintain a certain degree of reverence, but when facing the same monster beast clan, they were filled with a sense of superiority. In this point, they were actually no different from humans. They were also a group of interesting friends who did not have a few strengths and weaknesses. After flying for several months, they finally arrived at a place called the Peacock Stone. Of course, this was what the peacocks and the great geese called it. The other demonic beasts called it the Roaring Stone because the demonic beasts that competed for territory here with the green peacocks were called nightingales. The Peacock Stones were a group of meteorites. Thousands of large and small meteorites were intertwined together. This was an extremely common celestial phenomenon in the origin world. It couldn't even be called a celestial phenomenon because the environment here was very peaceful and there weren't any force field fluctuations. In the void of the universe, there was no way to mark boundaries. Therefore, regardless of whether it was demonic beasts or humans, the cornerstone of determining the airspace was to find a fixed celestial body and then use it as a foundation to include the surrounding space into their domain. The dispute between the green peacock and the roe owl originated from the airspace of this group of meteorites. There is no need to elaborate on the twists and turns involved. Throughout history, regardless of whether it was humans or beasts, disputes over territory had always been a situation where everyone was right and everyone was right. How could there be a conclusion? On the largest meteorite in the middle of the group of meteorites, there were two tribes standing opposite each other. One group was made up of beautiful green glazed peacocks, each with a feathered screen. The other group had the body of a goat, the face of a human, the teeth of a tiger, the claws of a human, and the voice of a baby. They were called the roe owls. The feathered screen was not for the sake of beauty, but for a form of combat readiness. It was not entirely green, but colorful and covered in a misty green light. This should be the entire tribe because there were also some small Jean Dan peacocks among them. In total, there were less than 100 of them. In terms of numbers, it was more or less the same as the Smoke Peacock tribe in the Five Rings Peacock Palace. It was unknown whether it was because of the difficulty of survival or the bloodline restriction. The number of roe owls on the opposite side was even smaller, less than 50. They also brought the old and the young with them. From this point alone, it was not a fight to the death between the tribes. It was more like a competition of strength. It was just a gathering of demonic beasts to resolve some of their internal disputes. This was the essence of it. Yin Jun looked at him and said, Jiwen, later, we will stand together with the Peacock tribe. However, I will be honest with you. Due to the pride of the Peacock tribe, they are not willing to accept help from other tribes easily, especially humans. In terms of the nature of this dispute, it is also an internal conflict of the demonic beast tribe. It is not suitable to involve other tribes. You know, as long as we have something to do with you humans, there will be endless disputes. A small matter will become a big matter, and a big matter will spread. Therefore, I will leave Yin Qi to accompany you. You can stay outside and watch the show. When this matter is over, no matter the result, we will go on a long journey. Lu Xiaoyi smiled and obeyed the arrangement. This was the right thing to do. No matter where it was the most basic principle to not involve other tribes in a fight between tribes. This was especially true for humans. Now that the general trend of the universe was changing, the human forces were scheming against each other in order to gamble on their fate. Everyone wanted to pull more participants to strengthen their forces. The demonic beasts were not stupid. They were not willing to get involved in the trivial matters of humans. It was also good to watch the show. Lu Xiaoyi did not have the ambition to save all the tribes. The green peacock was not the smoke peacock. They were not the same thing. Yin Qi was the youngest of the 12 great geese in the group. He was just about to enter the level of a monarch. His combat power was not strong enough. Therefore, it was natural to leave him outside to accompany the guest. How will it be resolved? Reason? Fight with their fists? It will not be a fight that will last for years, right? I can't afford to wait. Seventh goose was also a chatterbox. In fact, almost all the geese in the flock were chatterboxes. The true meaning of the phrase geese delivering letters, since ancient times, was not that the geese carried a letter back and forth. Instead, it referred to the fact that they loved to deliver information with their mouths. How can it be a fight that will last for years? Do you think this is the human world? We demonic beasts are the most straightforward. Usually, we follow ancient precedents and decide the outcome of a few battles. As for how many battles we will have, it is not clear. It depends on the scale of the matter and the size of the territory. Based on my experience, the Peacock Stone's airspace is worth about 3 battles. It will not be too many. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. Little 7, can you help me borrow a few feathers from them to put on my wings? I will give you a few jars of good wine. Yin Qi shook his head. No, I will be scolded. Ijun, don't harm me. The Peacock tribe does not give away their feathers easily unless they are very close to them. Didn't you say that you have friends in the smoke peacock? Why don't you go yourself? The demonic beasts below gradually gathered. Basically, all the demonic beasts had come to support them. However, the difference in numbers was huge. The green peacock only had the help of the great geese, while the royal had the support of more than 10 tribes. The rest of the tribes were just here to watch the show. Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. The demonic beast world was very strange. Those with noble bloodlines did not have the consciousness of being a leader, while those with inferior bloodlines did not know how to respect each other. It was a little chaotic. If a cultivation world war really came, what would these fellows be like? Amidst the commotion, the demonic beasts began to gather. Compared to the human Dharma assembly, there were no preachings. Everyone relied purely on their instincts to survive. Who would preach to who? Who would be able to learn whose supernatural powers? It was completely meaningless. Their gathering was to resolve a series of accumulated grievances in the past few hundred years. The demonic beasts were also intelligent. Although their system was basically built on bloodlines, they knew that some conflicts could not be ignored. They needed to be mediated and enlightened. Only then would they not cause internal strife among the demonic beasts. They did not have the ambition to dominate the universe. This was because even their ancestors, the immemorial sacred beasts, did not have such ambitions, let alone them. However, they could not possibly cause internal strife, right? Chapter 1477. Lu Xiaoyi could not be bothered with the trivial matters between demonic beasts. However, under 7th Yan's guidance, he recognized the origins of these demonic beasts. In the future, he would not be completely clueless when he traveled the universe. Among the species of demonic beasts, there is a very special existence called strange beasts. They are born from the heavens and earth. They are unique and cannot be replicated. They are also unable to reproduce and pass on. They are reclusive and kill easily. They think that the heavens and earth are spiritual and do not take demonic beasts seriously. When Yi Jun travels the universe in the future, he has to be careful of these things. Lu Xiaoyi had also heard of them before, but he had never seen them before. This was because these things were not something that human cultivators could raise. They are even stronger than ancient beasts. Although 7th Yin was somewhat indignant, he still knew his place. They are very powerful because they come from the heavens. Among the ancient beasts, perhaps only phoenixes and rocks can be mentioned in the same breath. However, these things are at the peak and do not have much room for growth. They are also not compatible with the Great Tao. Therefore, in terms of threat, they are actually the creatures that the higher-ups are least worried about. The man and the wild goose were pointing at each other, but no one cared about them. The attention of the crowd of beasts was focused on the conflict below. Some of them were yelling, and some were waving their fists at each other. None of them were calm at all. However, the demonic beasts controlled the scale very well. No matter how explosive the situation was, they could finally achieve a result that everyone could accept. This was the hidden power of demonic beast culture. They had their own ways, and they were different from humans. Of course, humans also found it difficult to understand. Obviously, the fight between the green peacock and the roe deer owl was arranged to be the last. This was because it was a fight between species, and because the green peacock had a special status. In Lu Xiaoyi's opinion, this roe deer owl group was not simple. The demonic beasts quarreled for about a month, and finally settled most of the small disputes. When it was the turn of the green peacock and the roe deer owl who had been quiet all this time, an accident happened. A human cultivator appeared in the line of sight of the demonic beasts. What puzzled Lu Xiaoyi was that the demonic beasts did not seem to find this strange. Instead, they seemed to take it for granted. Looking at the cultivator with slightly dark skin, concave eyes, and a high nose, Lu Xiaoyi felt that he had seen him before. What's going on? Didn't they say that demonic beasts' internal problems should be solved internally? How did a human get involved in this? Lu Xiaoyi was not the only human at the scene of the gathering of beasts. Lu Xiaoyi had long been aware of this. Considering that the appearance of demon beasts in the human cultivation world was very common, the appearance of a race like humans who liked to stir up trouble everywhere was nothing new. Just like him, Lu Xiaoyi, he was not the only one who liked to travel. The problem was that this person had openly appeared at the scene of the dispute. It was obvious that he wanted to join in the fray. This made him puzzled. 7th Yin sighed. It's a long story. The power behind this human is indeed related to the source of this conflict. This is something that all the demonic beasts know, so it's not strange for him to appear here. Lu Xiaoyi glanced at it, then looked at Wild Goose King and the rest of the people in the field. He understood that this group of honest wild geese was deliberately leading him into a trap. Of course, it was up to him whether he wanted to jump into the trap or not. No one forced him. However, this group of wild geese must have thought that he would jump into the trap. This was the purpose of this change of direction. Of course, there must be a coincidence in this. Maybe it was just a casual move by the wild geese, with the intention of bringing a guy over first. How honest. Not only were there no honest people in the cultivation world, but there were also no honest birds. Seeing that Lu Xiaoyi had shut up and stopped asking questions, 7th Yin had to continue talking. This was because the task given to it by its boss was to tell the whole story in full detail. As for the future, it would do as it saw fit. The roe owl is the inherited bloodline of Zhu Yin. A long, long time ago, an immortal once subdued a Zhu Yin and went to the immortal realm. You know, even among the Archean beasts, this is a rare treatment. Therefore, the Roal has a special status in this area of the beast territory. Lu Xiaoyi could roughly guess what it meant. Immortals like to ride beasts, not because they were faster, but because it was a symbol of status. In terms of speed, how many monsters could be faster than immortals who could change the world? Of course, immortals wouldn't choose ordinary beasts to ride. Simply put, just like how beauties didn't want to wear the same clothes, immortals also didn't want to bump into beasts. Therefore, immortals' mounts, pet beasts, elixir pills, and all kinds of other beasts were mostly mutated beasts. Because they were unique, others couldn't bump into them. Among the Archean beasts, phoenixes and rocks were exceptions. Because of their arrogant personalities, they were unwilling even to become immortals' mounts. Moreover, these two beasts also had their own species that had independently become immortals. Therefore, their noble bloodlines weren't just for show. They really had the support of their ancestors. The other Archean beasts were different. Basically, there were no species that could independently become immortals. Immortals were more willing to choose mutated beasts to ascend to the immortal realm. Therefore, if an immortal took a fancy to a Zhuyin and brought it up to the immortal realm, it would be a great fortune. Moreover, it would also benefit the entire species. Even the Zhuyin's impure descendants, such as the Roal, would benefit from it. In short, we have someone above us. Seeing that Lu Xiaoyi still didn't speak, Seventh Goose could only continue awkwardly. It also knew that its boss's intentions had been seen through. However, at this point, it didn't seem like there was any other way except to continue the introduction. They weren't all malicious. In the end, the humans still had to make the decision. Actually, the Great Goose Tribe knew that humans were supporting the Roal, so they also brought someone back to see if he could be a match for them. This was a very hasty decision made by the old Great Goose King. What everyone didn't understand was why their boss was so sure that this guy could be a match for the human behind the Roal. That immortal was born in the Hung River region. It's not far from our beast territory. Therefore, the Roal tribe and the cultivators of the Hung River region have always been in contact with each other. A few hundred years ago, the Roal tribe used this region to exchange for a green peacock treasure. They probably used it in the Hung River region, but the results weren't satisfactory. Now, they're here to settle the score. They're either exchanging the region or exchanging for a treasure. The Roal tribe might not have much intention in this. I'm afraid that they were mostly instructed by humans. The green peacock was unwilling to lower its head. It thought that it was in the right, so it stuck here. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. He didn't blame the Great Goose Tribe. However, it was very troublesome to be involved in such matters during a cultivation journey. He also didn't want to be too involved in these trivial matters of the universe. He had heard White Brows mention the Hung River region before. However, these people, they were born to be busy. Chapter 1478. What kind of place is the Hengi sector? Yin Qi heaved a sigh of relief. Since he was willing to talk, it meant there was a chance. They'd been traveling together for many years and had a good relationship. It was not right to bring him here without telling him the truth. It was not the way of true friends. The Hengi sector is the closest human sector to the beast territory. I have never been there. I have only heard of its legends from people of the same race and close friends. It is a very strange sector. It is very powerful, but its orthodoxy is unknown. Some say it is the origin of Buddhism or a variant of Buddhism. However, there is a big difference in the doctrines. Buddhism talks about patience, and it talks about patience. However, Buddhism talks about equality, but the Hengi sector talks about law and karmic reincarnation. To put it simply, law referred to the norms of people's lives and actions. The so-called karmic reincarnation meant that if people lived according to the law given to them, their souls could be reincarnated to a higher level after death. The inequality in this world was predestined by the previous life. There are three main gods in the Hengi sector. This is completely different from Buddhism, and, of course, it is even more different from Taoism. The legends about the Hengi sector are very vague. Unless you go there yourself, you will not be able to completely understand what kind of orthodoxy it is. Yin Qi's words were vague, but Lu Xiaoyi understood. The universe was big and full of strange things. If Taoism and Buddhism could appear in this cultivation world, then it was not strange for other forms of sex to appear here. The question was, what did they want to do? Were they content to stay in a corner, or did they want to gain something during the changing of the universe? What kind of role did they play in this time's chaotic space war? Were they innocent? Were they unrelated? Or were they hiding deep within? Lu Xiaoyi did not think that the Buddhists of the main world had revealed all their trump cards this time. In fact, they had tested the strength of the fifth ring, but their true strength was unfathomable. There must be some forces that had not appeared in the eyes of the universe's cultivation world. The White Brow had once mentioned the Hengyi realm to him. It was one of the few realms in the universe that could be compared to the fifth ring Zhou Xian, including the Anchor Chain realm, the Radiant realm, and the Sunken realm. One of them was the Hengyi realm, which showed that its strength could not be underestimated. It was just that it had always kept a low profile, so low profile that no one really knew about it. Lu Xiaoyi didn't want to understand it either. It wasn't easy for him to get rid of his inner demon, so there was no reason for him to fall back into it. Thus, he decided to use his sword to solve the problem, if possible, asking what was right and wrong. Kill it if you don't like it. This should be the attitude of swordsmen. The great swan geese were indeed very good. They had successfully hooked his interest because he really did not like this realm. This came from some memories of his previous life. Since he was here, and with the great swan geese adding fuel to the fire, he only needed to appear more bloodthirsty. He knew very well that if this was really the orthodoxy that he knew in his previous life, there was no need to interact with them at all. He would just keep beating them up. He looked at Seven Wild Goose and said seriously, "I've always treated the great swan geese as friends, but I didn't expect you to use me as a weapon. There's no need to talk about the past. Tell me directly, what do you want me to do? If you keep telling me half the truth from now on, then I don't want to be your friend anymore." Seven Wild Goose was shocked. He knew that what he was going to say next might forever change their relationship with this human, and it might even change their relationship with the orthodoxy behind him. The reason why the great swan geese kept Seven Wild Goose here was not only because he wanted to take care of Seven Wild Goose's youth, but more importantly, Seven Wild Goose's position in the great swan geese tribe meant that he had the right to make decisions. In an instant, Seven Wild Goose made up his mind. He decided to tell the truth. This depended on his understanding of this Taoist over the past few years. If he continued to lie, he was afraid that he would lose more than he gained. Jun, I would like to express my sincere apologies for scheming against you. This was not the original intention of our friendship, nor was it a scheme from the beginning. Please believe me, when we first met, we didn't have any other intentions, and we really treated you as a friend. It was only when we learned that the green peacock and the roe owl were going to confront each other in the beast gathering that we had this idea on the spur of the moment. We didn't want to force you, so we kept you here to let you make your own decision. Whether you're willing to help or not, the decision lies with you, not with us. Seeing that the human Taoist did not refute, Seven Wild Goose continued, "Why do we want to bring a human cultivator with us? There are many reasons. Actually, we don't really understand why the great swan geese trust you so much. It's because, in our opinion, the cultivators of the Hung River boundary are not to be trifled with. Their strength is not something that can be represented by a low-profile reputation. Normal human cultivators can't control them. The Hung River boundary cultivators are behind the roe owl. This is not a secret in the beast gathering territory. Everyone knows. The roe owl even helped the people of the Hung River boundary rope in other beast clans, but most of them didn't agree. The Green Peacock clan's treasure that the roe owl exchanged for has long been rumored to not be very useful in the Hung River boundary. It doesn't live up to its name. Actually, the Green Peacock clan and we both know that this is just an excuse. To our two clans, reputation is more important than anything else. We definitely won't use shoddy goods as good ones and exaggerate the treasure. If they say it's not useful, it's either they used it improperly or they have other intentions. As for the Royal clan coming to settle the score, we have long expected it, but we don't know when they will make trouble. The Great Swan Geese once reminded the Green Peacock clan that if the Royal makes trouble, it's very likely that the cultivators of the Hung River boundary will support from behind. Therefore, we should also find a human to support us. But as you know, the Peacock clan is too arrogant to the point of being stubborn. They don't think that they have lost anything, so they don't bother to form factions. In the end, they ended up like this, facing enemies all alone. This is also the result of being too inflexible. We only learned about the beast gathering 3 years after we met you, Great Swan Geese. As the only ally of the Green Peacock clan, it's only right for us to come and support you. Because you happen to be in the group, everyone said to pull you along as well. Just treat it as a sightseeing. Maybe you can come in handy? Of course, the final decision will always be in your hands, Great Swan Geese. If you help the Peacock clan, we can't thank you enough. If you choose not to help because of other reasons, we will still be friends. After all, in the cultivation world, this kind of dispute will involve karma. Not only oneself, but also the sect behind you. So I stayed here to explain to you. I want to see if you are willing to help the Green Peacock clan in this kind of situation. Great Swan Geese will be honest. First, it depends on your wish. Second, it depends on your strength. If you feel that you have no problem, then we can think of a solution in this regard. If you are unwilling or feel that your strength is limited, it's human nature not to stand out. You don't have to bear too much burden. Chapter 1479. How can I help? Everyone knows that the Hung River Sect cultivator is one of the main characters of this incident, but I don't have any relationship with the Green Peacock race. Do you think they will let a complete stranger like me get involved? Lu Xiaoyi didn't give up. He still needed to see clearly. Once he started helping, it might be a dead knot that could never be untied. Seventh Yin thought that he could rely on himself or the power behind him to help the Peacock race get through this. But they didn't understand Lu Xiaoyi. From Lu Xiaoyi's point of view, the best way to negotiate was to send the opponent to hell. After drinking Grandma Meng's soup, everyone could still be friends. Seventh Yin wasn't at the scene, so he couldn't make up his mind. Let's see how Seventh Yin and the rest negotiate. In the space of the beast territory, the Green Peacock race's abilities are unique. They have a kind of pressure that can subdue most of the beasts here other than the Great Geese race, including the Royal race. That's why I think the Royal race won't appear. We'll use the most ancient battle in the beast territory to settle this. I'm afraid that the Hung River Sect cultivator will make a move. Their martial arts are very evil. They're neither Buddhist nor Taoist, and the pressure of the peacock is useless against you humans. Seventh Yin, you just need to wait. If Boss and the rest have an idea, they will inform you and see how we can participate. Both sides had already made a decision. Reconciliation was impossible. The Royal race had come with a purpose, and the Green Peacock race was arrogant and cold. Other than using the traditional method of the beast territory, there was no other way. This was the world of the demonic beasts, and they firmly believed that the strong were the kings. This was their tradition, and humans had to follow all of this. Bozol faced a group of feathered beasts and spoke leisurely. The noble peacock feather is a legendary treasure. Although it can't be compared to the peacock plume, it has a special effect in supporting, transforming, and storing one's fate. This is a legend that has been passed down for countless years in the beast territory. Unfortunately, it's not acclimatized in the Hung River realm. In the Hung River realm, the peacock feather can't be controlled, and the transportation is messed up, causing the stored fate to disappear. There are many mistakes when using it, but the actual effect is completely different from the legends. I wonder how the peacock race will explain this. Does the treasure have to be used in the place where it's used? He took out a feather. It was the peacock feather that the Royal had exchanged for hundreds of years ago. The treasure is not damaged, and it belongs to your clan. You should know if my eternal river realm has tampered with it. If you don't believe me, you can send someone to follow me back to the Ganges River to see the effects of this feather. The leader of the Green Peacock's party was Kong Shi, who was in the Sun Spirit realm. He glanced at this human indifferently and didn't bother to explain. If he was deliberately looking for trouble, this kind of thing couldn't be explained clearly. There's no need. Tell me where you came from. Why go around in circles and waste everyone's time? Bowazo smiled. He had long heard of the green peacock's temper. It was a proud beast that could be bullied. In the eyes of humans, these so-called noble beasts were not difficult to deal with. If they had a reputation to protect, they would have a weakness that could be exploited. Historically, Hung River and the Beast Territory have been friendly neighbors for millions of years. They shouldn't be fighting over such a small matter. However, this airspace is where the Royal lives. It's not good for Dafa to give it away. There has to be a result that both sides can live with. How about this? For the sake of our friendship, your Peacock clan can propose a solution and see if there's any room for negotiation. Kong Shi raised his eyebrows. What solution? There's no solution. 500 years ago, when you came to ask for the peacock feather, I told you clearly that the use of the peacock feather depends on the occasion. There's no such thing as an omnipotent treasure in this world. I advise you to be careful. You must have persisted at that time until today's matter. Since fellow Taoist has asked, I'll say the Green Peacock clan's attitude again. This is a separate matter. The previous transaction has been completed, and the peacock feather has been verified. It's in line with the contract, so it's permanent. Today's request, whether it's to return this airspace or to exchange for a new treasure, is a different transaction. My Peacock clan has the right to refuse. If you want to use force, I'd like to see how big of a wave you, a Hung River cultivator, can make in the Beast Territory. Bohal smiled. The Peacock clan's reaction was within his expectations. Although he was only at the primordial soul realm, he knew that the green peacocks couldn't do anything to him, even though he wasn't completely fearless here. This was the propriety of the demonic beasts when interacting with humans. If it was someone with no background, he could kill them. However, they had been neighbors for hundreds of thousands of years and were wary of each other. There was also a group of demonic beasts standing on the side of Hung River. So what could the sun god Peacock do to him? Of course, he couldn't appear too overbearing. He had a purpose for coming here this time. He wanted to bring one or several green peacocks back to the Hung River realm and use the green peacock's power to control the peacock feather. This was the reason why the peacock feather wasn't very effective in the Hung River realm. How about this? Since no one is willing to give in, it doesn't seem appropriate for anyone to compromise. Then, let's follow the rules of the Beast Territory and see who has the ability to decide the direction. Seeing the green peacocks looking at each other coldly, Bohal threw out his plan. Fighting and killing is not what I want. I think it's also not what the Peacock clan and the Royal clan want. However, if we make a mistake, the consequences will be unpredictable. It will have a huge impact on the interactions between the Hung River realm and the Hung River realm. Do you all agree with what I said? Many demonic beasts nodded in agreement. The internal strife between the demonic beasts was still fine, but now that the Royal clan obviously didn't dare to take the field, the Hung River realm cultivators had taken the responsibility and turned it into a contest between the Hung River realm cultivators and the Peacock clan. This situation was a little precarious. The universe was in chaos, the great Tao was collapsing, and chaos was everywhere. The demonic beasts didn't want to get themselves involved in this kind of chaos, so they were especially careful when dealing with humans. They were afraid that they would fall into a pit if they didn't pay attention and get involved in the so-called general trend of the universe. Therefore, regardless of whether they stood on the Royal clan side or neutral, they all agreed with the Hung River realm cultivators. The peacocks were also helpless. They knew that this was a sign that the Hung River realm cultivators were about to do something evil. However, since they were in the Beast Territory, they couldn't go against all the demonic beasts. Moreover, they always believed that strength was everything. With the 3 young soul stage peacocks in the Peacock clan, no matter what kind of bet they made, how could they be afraid of a small human primordial soul stage cultivator? It was a fact that human cultivators were stronger than demonic beasts in the same realm. However, this didn't include the 2 most special species, the peacocks and the swan geese. They had a noble bloodline and outstanding abilities. Compared to human cultivators in the same realm, they weren't at a disadvantage. Moreover, they were suppressing their realm, so what was there to worry about? Chapter 1480. Vohal waved his sleeves, and a long scroll of silk appeared in the air. I have a painting called the Eternal River Painting. It's also a treasure of the Hung River realm. It's a collection of post-celestial spirit treasures, and it's the mother river of the Hung River realm. This painting is made in the shape of the Hung River and carries the spiritual sustenance of the people of Hung River. It's vast and mighty. Just like life, it's eternal. We, the people of Hung River, whether we're cultivators or mortals, must bathe in it whenever there's a major event in our lives. Every strand of our spirit is entrusted to the Eternal River Painting. He looked at the peacock tribe. You have the sun god, great demon. To be honest, I can't compare, but the wonders of cultivation don't necessarily lie in bloody battles. I'm willing to throw my spirit into the Eternal River Painting with the 3 seniors of the peacock tribe. We'll go against the flow and compete in speed. Whoever crosses the entire river first will be the winner. This competition will not only not fail because of fighting, but also fully test the strength of each person's spirit. I'm very familiar with this painting, and the 3 grand monarchs have a higher realm than me. It's not like anyone has the advantage. Do the 3 of you dare to accept such a competition? This kind of gambling competition usually occurred with cultivators of a higher realm. There were countless disputes in the cultivation world, and there were always many conflicts that needed to be resolved. You couldn't always have disputes with cultivators of the same realm, and it was even more impossible for everyone to be like Lu Xiaoyi, who had the ability to kill those of a higher realm. So usually, the party with a lower realm would offer a method that they thought was advantageous to them, and see if the other party would accept it. To accept or not to accept? That was the question. Was the lower realm cultivator more familiar with their method? Or was the higher realm cultivator more confident in their own strength? That was a matter of opinion. But under normal circumstances, the higher realm cultivators who thought highly of themselves wouldn't reject such a method. Because of their personality, because of their fearlessness, and even more so because of their confidence in their strength. Especially for the Peacock clan, how could they possibly shrink back? From this point, the Hung River Realm cultivators were already prepared. They didn't have to worry about the Hung River Realm cultivators playing tricks. How could the sun god spirit be so easily schemed against? There were so many spectators around. For a demon beast with a more straightforward personality, trying to kill someone in this kind of situation was basically cutting off their own path of retreat. Not only would Bowazo die for sure, the beast territory would also forever be at odds with the Hengi realm, not to mention the crazy revenge of the peacock race in the future. This was only a branch of the peacock. It was far from being the entire peacock. For the sake of reassuring everyone, Bohal added another layer of insurance by spreading the river of long curls into the air. The diagram of the eternal river has its own spirit. For the sake of fairness, I am willing to remove the spirit seal and only display the pure diagram of the eternal river. Isn't this very sincere? Kong, she raised her eyebrows and spat out a few words. No need. A mere curled spirit can't control us. The green peacocks wanted to show that they didn't care, but Bohal wanted to show that he was selfless. Before I came here, an elder said that in this competition, our Hengi field felt like we were bullying others. Therefore, if we display this map, we must not allow Wan Ling to control it. This is an apology and also a show of sincerity. If I fail, the peacock feather will be returned to me in its original form, and the sky region will no longer be in conflict with you. This will be an eternal example. If I succeed, I ask the peacock race to send one or more fellow Taoists to the Hengi field to help display the power of the peacock feather. The sky region will still belong to the peacock race. This condition, this bet, can be considered very sincere. It was obvious that the people of Hengi field really wanted the peacock race to send someone to the Hengi field. As for why, was it really to control the peacock feather, Or did they have other motives? No one could say for sure. The peacock race rarely entered the human domain alone. They were very social, and were even more wary of humans. Because of their noble bloodline, they were always on guard against cultivators with ulterior motives. But this time, the cultivators of Hengi Field were very dafa and did not hide their intentions. In other words, it might not be as bad as they thought. The three young spirit peacocks' divine senses converged, and they all had the inclination to agree. They also didn't want to be too stiff with the Hengi Field because of this. The fear was mutual. The people of Hengi Field were afraid of the entire peacock race, and they, the green peacocks, were only one of them. The Hengi Field was close at hand, and their strength was unfathomable. Yanjun interrupted at the right time. Fellow Taoists, can you listen to me? The relationship between them had been tested for a long time, and they were also the only true friends of the peacock race in this beast territory. Although they didn't agree on many ideas, they were willing to listen to their friends' opinions at critical moments. It's not appropriate for all three of you to go in. There's a saying among humans, don't put all your eggs in a basket. Although I also think that the map of the Eternal River has no problem, it doesn't mean that I will put the highest combat power of the whole race into it. At least one of you should stay outside. Yanjun's reminder was very timely, and it also showed his experience. There is a deep meaning in this saying, don't have the heart to harm others, but don't lose the heart to guard against others. The three young spirit peacocks talked for a while and decided to leave one outside and two inside. They felt that since the cultivator of Hengi Field was so dafa, it was not safe for only one young spirit to go in. If there was an oversight, it would be too late to regret it. Yanjun sighed. In fact, he hoped that only one young spirit peacock would go in, but this was probably the biggest concession the peacock race could make, so he couldn't ask for too much. Everyone stood from a different point of view, and the way they saw the problem was also different. He hoped that his allies would be safe and sound, but the young spirit's peacocks didn't want to lose face, so they had to win. I know a human friend. Coincidentally, during this period of time, he is a guest of our Swan Goose clan. I think that since the cultivator of Hengi Field is so generous to allow the three peacocks to enter the scroll of the Eternal River, he must be very confident. And this confidence even exceeds the limit of the realm. Forgive me for being rude, but I'm afraid that only the great goose race will talk to you like this. For safety's sake, there is no need for three peacocks to go in. You two young spirits are already there, so why add a little peacock? It's meaningless. It's better to let a human go in. I promise that this person's strength is very good, and he could be the last safeguard. The three peacocks looked at each other, and their attitudes were quite uniform. Kongshi refused. We will never forget the friendship between the great goose race and our peacock race, so no matter what you say, we know that it is a kind reminder, but we won't accept the help of a strange human. This is the principle of the green peacock race, and it has never changed. Yanjun sighed again. He had expected this. After getting along with each other for tens of thousands of years, how could he not know each other's temperament? In this case, I will use a right-left by our ancestors, the Great Rock and the Phoenix. When we have different views on the matter, any race has the right to ask for their own suggestions to be respected. No one can monopolize it. The three candidates are led by your peacock race, so you can choose two, and the remaining one, according to the rules left by our ancestors, the great goose race is qualified to choose. Chapter 1481. Kongshi was speechless. They had thought that it would be acceptable if the great goose race sent one goose to join the three candidates. After all, everyone in the beast territory knew that the two races were allies. If that was the case, they would not reject it. It was a kind gesture. Besides, the great goose and the peacock race had different abilities. They complemented each other and could increase the success rate. But what about the humans? Did they need the help of humans? In the end, what was supposed to be a problem of the beast territory would turn into a fight between humans. Humans were everywhere. They were even more ubiquitous than Zerg. The agreement mentioned by Lord Yanjun did exist. Its actual meaning was that the two tribes should be united, instead of one tribe acting arbitrarily. Yanjun's request was reasonable. According to the ancient agreement, the peacock would choose two candidates and the great goose would choose one. This was the best interpretation of the ancient agreement. However, Kangxi reminded, even if we agree, the Ganges people might not agree. After all, even though he was involved as a human being and had a lot to do with this matter, what was up with this human being that you found? What is his connection? If he is just a friend of the great goose race, it will be a little difficult. If he rejects, most of the demons will support him. Yanjun still insisted. Let's try. Who knows? We have to try our best. If this is the will of the heavens, then there is nothing to say. It sent out a divine sense invitation. Thus, under the gazes of countless demonic beasts, another human entered the scene of confrontation. Some of the older and more experienced demonic beasts sighed one after another. What the F***CK? Why are there human shit stirs everywhere? Looking at this sloppy human Taoist, a bad premonition arose in Bahizuo's heart. Who were the most feared by humans in the cultivation universe? It was not the so-called powerful, terrifying, bloody, or strange races. They were most afraid of their own kind. Although he looked inconspicuous and his aura was limited, he was only a master. However, the shit-stirring ability of humans had little to do with their realms. This was their instinct. Everyone was good at it. Everyone was born with it. Stirring up the world, the universe, the present, and the future. How should I address you, Taoist friend? Where did you come from? Where are you from? Why did you appear so suddenly? Lu Xiaoyi was all smiles. Come from where you came from. Come from where you came from. What's your intention? Nothing much, just looking around and stirring things up. When you get married, I'll go first. When you take a dump, I'll block your eyes. He was a universal cultivator hooligan. That was not the judgment of Hexazol. Cultivators like this were everywhere in the universe, and they took pride in ruining people's good deeds. However, he wouldn't underestimate this person's abilities because of this. Anyone who dared to wander around the beast territory alone was definitely not a good person. Therefore, the best way was to reject his participation. He wasn't that Dafa. It didn't matter if one person came. What he wanted was a success rate. Even if the 3 people who came in were all peacock young gods, he was sure that he would win. But with a humanine god, there were variables. If you want to enter the Eternal River Scroll, you must have karma with this matter. You're either a member of the Peacock clan or an ally of the Peacock clan. Which one are you, fellow Taoist? Lu Xiaoyi scratched his head. I am Peacock's ally. Bohal looked at Kangxi. This person says he is Peacock's ally. Then you must know where he came from? Kangxi was slightly embarrassed. She really couldn't stand Hongyan's helplessness. It was a clear matter, but he had to make a fool of himself. In the end, he was even mocked by others. My Green Peacock clan doesn't know this person. We also don't know where he came from. Maybe he's a wanderer who came here to make his presence known? She turned to Lu Xiaoyi. Hey, why aren't you leaving? There are countless great demons here. If you annoy everyone and waste everyone's time, you'll be in trouble. Do you really think this is the human's airspace and you can do whatever you want? She still had sympathy for him. She knew that he was a friend of the Great Goose Tribe. Now, she was taking the opportunity to find a way out for him so that he could leave quickly. Otherwise, there were already some impatient demonic beasts in the surroundings. If things really got chaotic, the few members of the Great Goose Tribe might not be able to protect him. Many demons in the surrounding space were jeering and howling. Clearly, they were extremely dissatisfied with him wasting time here. They were all impatient and wanted to see the result. Who would be willing to see a clown like him? Yanjun was a little embarrassed, but he didn't know what to say. He was in a good mood, but his plan wasn't very thorough. It was too rushed. Lu Xiaoyi glared at him. Clearly, he was very dissatisfied with his ability. It was just a matter of qualifications, but he still had to do it himself. He really didn't know how this descendant of the great Peng managed to survive. He slapped his forehead. Look at my brain. It's a little messed up after being kicked by Hongyan. Yes, I am indeed not an ally of Peacock Clan. I'm actually a relative of Peacock clan. Relative, this karma should be enough, right? Relative? The demons in the surroundings all laughed. This was even more unreliable than an ally. Everyone knew that Peacock clan kept themselves clean and never fooled around with other creatures. In the millions of years of the beast territory, they really hadn't heard of any Peacock clan relatives from other clans. How is this possible? A few Peacock young deities looked unhappy. They were about to open their mouths and turn hostile, but they were stopped by Yanjun. He had heard this Taoist boast that he knew the Smoky Peacock clan. Although he didn't believe that there would be a smoky peacock who would take a fancy to him and give him its blood, he could only take a gamble this time. Smoky peacocks, although in terms of status, were illegitimate children. They were the illegitimate children of the Phoenix. Their bloodlines were even more superior than the other 4 peacock clans. Bohizuo laughed. What a clown. He dared to say anything. He didn't know what would happen to other demon clans, but if they could prove that he was lying, the Peacock clan wouldn't let him go. Therefore, he added fuel to the fire. Good. We cultivators believe in solid evidence the most. We never make baseless assumptions. How about this? When this feather was used, other biological orthodoxies, including humans, would only be able to unleash the 5-colored light. Only the peacocks themselves would be able to unleash the 7-colored light, thus fully unleashing the power of this treasure. Since you say that you are a relative of the Peacock clan, then I won't ask too much of you. As long as you can use this feather and release 6 rays of light, I will admit that you are a relative of the Peacock clan and allow you to participate. Why? Do you dare to give it a try? He was confident because in the hundreds of years in the Eternal River Realm, who knew how many powerful experts had used this peacock feather. Regardless of the realm, in deity, primordial spirit, young deity, they could only release 5 rays of light. This was the strange thing about the peacock feather. It had nothing to do with the realm. Therefore, he wasn't worried that this Taoist would use some kind of special ability to release more rays of light. This was the uniqueness of the most noble bloodline of demon beasts. No one could change it. Chapter 1482. In the eyes of all the beasts, this was the last chance to leave. If they admitted their mistake, they would take advantage of the fact that everyone was still watching the show and quickly run away. Otherwise, it would be impossible to escape even if they grew wings. But this human was really courting death. He laughed and stretched out his hand to grab the peacock feather. This human was dead. He was still unaware. Finally, he grabbed the peacock feather and a luster flashed. This was due to the mysterious power of the cultivator. For other beasts, including humans, it could release 5 rays of brilliance, each with their own wonderful uses. Therefore, it was not strange that there was a flash of brilliance at the beginning. Even if a pig went up, it would be able to get 5 of them. 1 ray, 2 rays. Lu Xiaoyi was not in a hurry, but in fact, he was far from being as calm as he appeared. This was because this peacock feather treasure was very strange. It seemed that the number of rays of brilliance produced was not up to him. 3, 4, 5 rays should be the limit. This was the consensus of all the beasts and humans present. Then, naturally, the 6th ray of brilliance appeared. It's really a relative. I wonder what kind of relative it is. Some beast cried out in surprise. Lu Xiaoyi was very embarrassed. Son-in-law, the kind that marries into the family. Everyone's surprise did not stop because after the 6th ray of brilliance appeared, a 7th ray of brilliance appeared. This time, even all the Peacock clansmen were dumbfounded. How is this possible? If there was really an Azure Peacock who became Tao companions with this person, there would be 1 less ray of brilliance. If there were 6 rays, how could there be 7 rays like the Peacock clan? Several Peacock young gods immediately realized a problem. This son-in-law was definitely not from the Azure Peacock clan. He was not even from the Yellow Peacock, Purple Peacock, or White Peacock clansmen. He could only be from the Red Peacock or Smoke Peacock clansmen with the noblest bloodlines. The peacock bloodline could only be passed on to one person in a lifetime. The person who received it would possess abilities that were slightly inferior to the peacock bloodline. For example, among the 5 peacock clans, the peacock clans of the green, yellow, purple, and white peacock clans could only emit 7 rays of light. Correspondingly, their son-in-law, that is, their Taoist companions who were not of the peacock clan, could borrow the power of the peacock clans to emit 6 rays of light. The number of rays would decrease by 1. This was the rule. Those completely unrelated people, if they were authorized by the peacock, could also activate the peacock feather, but the brilliance emitted would be 1 less ray. This was the reason why Behizo could only emit 5 rays no matter who it was in the Eternal River realm for hundreds of years. This was also the reason why they had to invite a peacock. Only a real peacock would be able to unleash the full power of the peacock's feathers. The 7 rays of light could wipe out everything. But among them, the red and smoke peacocks who were directly under the phoenix were different. Because their bloodlines were more noble and their abilities were more powerful, the peacocks of these 2 clans could actually emit 8 rays of light. Don't underestimate the extra ray. It meant the difference in their abilities. As for the existence that could emit 9 rays of light, other than the phoenix itself, there was no one else. This was already a concept that did not belong to the mortal world. These things were the secrets of the peacock clan. Outsiders did not know at all. According to this logic, the 6 rays of brilliance produced by this Taoist were not too shocking, because he might have had an affair with some peacock tribesmen. Whether it was by cheating, or willingly using force, once he was infected, he was infected. But now that he had emitted 7 rays of light, according to the principle of decreasing, it meant that his Taoist companions could only be from the red and smoke clans. This identity was not ordinary. If he said that he was qualified to participate in this gambling fight, then it was justified. It was equivalent to the eldest cousin of the main branch of the distant main branch coming to help. What was the problem? This eldest cousin also knew that something was wrong in his own heart, so he put in a lot of effort to pretend. He originally wanted to show his face, and now he did, but there was a tendency to spread to the whole body. How would he know how many rays of light he could emit? His eldest cousin was an idiot. He did not understand the main branch at all. This was also the first time he came into contact with the peacock feather, but although he was a little stunned, he still had a basic intuition. He knew that if this ray of light continued to emit, it might cause some unnecessary trouble and misunderstandings. So in the process of emitting the rays of light, he desperately looked for a way to control it. In terms of the number, it was enough. He could not continue to emit more. Although in his previous life, he was a spammer, brushing up favorability, brushing up the list, but that was just a spammer. Now that he was emitting real light, it would cause misunderstandings. Fortunately, he still had the ability, it was just that he had never used it before, so he was a little rusty. From the first ray of light to the 7th ray, he had basically mastered the method of controlling it. Finally, when the 8th ray of light was slightly exposed, he cut it off. But such a small change could deceive all the other demonic beasts present. It could deceive humans. It could deceive little peacocks whose realm was not high, but it could not deceive the 3 young spirit peacocks. They knew very well that this Taoist was deliberately controlling it. So the 8th ray of light was not emitted, but it did not mean that he did not have the ability to emit the 8th ray of light. According to the principle of decreasing, being able to emit the 8th ray of light meant that his Taoist companion could emit the 9th ray. This meant that his Taoist companion was not eldest cousin. It was his king father-in-law. Mr. Liu stopped his favorite spammer and said complacently, "Am I considered a relative of a peacock?" The 3 young spirit peacocks nodded solemnly and bowed together. Although he was not old and was not worth mentioning to their peacock clan, they could not stand up to his seniority. It was equivalent to this person accidentally marrying your great-grandmother, and this matter was really troublesome. Bowazo was also very helpless. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, He could not change what he had said. He really could not understand which peacock was blind enough to take a fancy to such a plaything. There were countless cultivators in the eternal river realm, and geniuses came forth in large numbers. It had been a neighbor of the beast territory for hundreds of thousands of years, but not a single cultivator had such an opportunity. This person, at a glance, looked like a snake with a crooked nose and slanted eyes. His appearance was like a mirror, and he was definitely not a good person. He still did not know what kind of despicable methods he used. Later, he would have to quietly remind the peacocks not to fall for this evil trick. Of course, he did not know that such a reminder was destined to be useless in sowing discord. To the young spirit peacocks, if this Taoist could only emit 6 rays of light, then they would have to carefully investigate his origins. He might have used some unspeakable method, but now he could emit 8 rays. Anyone could be fooled, but would the supreme existence of the Phoenix bloodline be fooled? They were all existences that had been reborn from the ashes. Investigate? Would they dare to investigate? Was it normal for a great-grandson to investigate his great-grandmother's life? Was it not chaotic? Lu Xiaoyi naturally obtained the qualifications to participate in the gamble, and Yin Jun shook its head to side. This guy, he was not bragging. Chapter 1483. The Long Scroll of the Eternal River. A lifetime of experience. Overturned common sense. Never to be seen again. The format of the battle was to enter from one end of the Eternal River and then swim out from the other end of the river. If it were a real river in the Eternal River realm, such a bet would be a joke. A river would not pose any obstacle to cultivators. However, this was the scroll of the Eternal River. It was a condensed, acquired spiritual treasure that was based on the Eternal River. It was a sample taken from the real world and perfectly replicated. The entire scroll was filled with pure, eternal river water essence, including the spiritual sustenance of the people of the Eternal River, who had been connected to the Eternal River for hundreds of thousands of years and regarded it as their mother river. The long scroll of the Eternal River was no longer just a river, but everything to the people of the Eternal River. It was the origin of life, and also the end of life. Regarding this point, although the 2 peacocks had a long lifespan, they had never been to the Eternal River realm, so they did not know what this river meant to them, who had always been obsessed with cleanliness. However, Lu Jingfu had already predicted this. It was their spiritual bodies that entered the long scroll of the Eternal River. It was not necessary to do so. In fact, the real body of a real person could also enter, but if the real person entered, the spirit of the Eternal River could not be removed. This was because the power of the scroll alone could not contain the surging mana of the Yang gods. Only when the spiritual bodies entered and were compatible with the essence of the long scroll of the Eternal River could the spirit be removed. Only then could the 4 spiritual bodies compete in the most fair way in the pure long scroll of the Eternal River. Due to the fact that they were only using their spiritual bodies, they were unable to use some of the spells they knew in the real world. They could only compete in terms of purity, depth, comprehension, and Tao realm. Most of the time, they would be using a more abstract method to carry out the duel. For example, the peacock's powerful body and Lu Xiaoyi's flying sword could not be used here. It was the main reason why Behizuo was confident that he could beat them. The Eternal River was not an ordinary river. If you were to compare it with the rivers of other realms, you would be gravely mistaken. This was something that the 3 challengers would eventually understand. Amidst the cheers, the 4 participants each sat down, their spirits leaving their bodies and leaping into the long scroll of the Eternal River. Before they returned, their bodies were the most vulnerable targets. Of course, there was no such risk here. There were thousands of demonic beasts around. Bohizo's body was protected by dozens of roe deer owls. The 2 peacocks and Lu Xiaoyi's body were surrounded by hundreds of green peacocks and geese. What a joke! How could anything happen to the body of the ancestors' fresh meat? The 4 spirits entered from the source of the Eternal River. At the start, There was nothing special about it. This was an incomparably tall, snowy mountain range, majestic and majestic, stretching for thousands of miles. Pure and cool snow water gradually gathered from the various snowy mountains, forming a trickle, a stream, a river, and a river. This process was the same as the formation of rivers in other realms. It was the law of nature. As the water gathered and flowed forward, it flowed with other rivers and lakes, finally flowing into the sea. Under the influence of the climate, wind rose and rain fell, forming a closed cycle. It wasn't difficult for the god physique to move forward in such an environment. Although the water was gradually increasing, it wasn't enough to pose a real obstacle for a perfected Lord's spiritual body. The real obstacle lay in other aspects. After leaving the beautiful, snowy mountain, after entering the densely populated areas, in the previous race, the two peacock spirits swam the fastest. Their spiritual bodies were the strongest, and the surging water did not affect them at all. The two human spirits followed behind them from a distance. Bohezuo knew what was going on and was not in a hurry. Lu Xiaoyi, on the other hand, was like a piece of sticky candy, following closely beside him. He did not stop spouting trash talk along the way. The mortals of the eternal river realm have led such a tough life. Look at the houses on both sides of the river. None of them are good to look at. Speaking of which, is it so difficult to build a beautiful house and paint it new? It's like a pigsty. Look, the people who pull the stakes all end up in the river. Bohezuo had his reasons. What is the purpose of a person's life? Is it for the suffering of this life? Of course not. It is for the people above the people in the next life, in cultivation, in repentance, in order to be able to live a better life when reincarnated, to have a higher status. A house is just a temporary shelter from the wind and rain. What's the use of building it so well? It can't be taken away. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Then what's the point of living in the eternal river realm? Just throw them into the river and drown them when they're born. Save on food, and most importantly, save on excretion. Look, 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 how is this a river? It's a smelly drain, a sewer, a big toilet for the entire eternal river realm. Speaking of which, why are there so many people rushing here from so far away? Is it because it's more romantic to take a dump here? Bohezuo was very disdainful. The people of the eternal river realm must bathe in the sacred river at least once in their lives. This is their belief. If they can't be born in the eternal river, they must be buried in the eternal river. This is the power of belief. You don't understand. It was shocking to see the riverbank from the river. There were dirty and dilapidated houses along the way, and all of them had big and small steps leading to the water. Most of the houses were cheap inns. Among the tenants, there were those who stayed for a day or two to bathe, and there were also those who stayed longer to wait for death. Those who were waiting for death had to bathe every day. Therefore, the house and the steps were crowded with people of all kinds, going in and out of them. Most of them couldn't even afford to stay in the inns, especially the old people who were waiting for death. Did they know when they would die? How could they have so much money to stay in the inns? They could only sleep on the riverbank, with piles of tattered luggage beside them. They wouldn't leave because, according to the customs here, they could be cremated for free if they died on the riverbank, and their ashes would be dumped into the eternal river. If they left and died halfway, they would have no fate with the eternal river. With so many people sleeping by the riverbank like ants waiting for death, how much excretion would there be every day? Thus, the entire riverbank stank. Some people of the eternal river realm thought that if they died and their ashes were dumped into the eternal river, they would definitely mix with other people's ashes, and it would be difficult for them to return to their original form in heaven. Thus, they pushed the whole corpses into the eternal river and let them drift. The climate here was hot, and the result was obvious. At this moment, the sky was still dark and the temperature was still low. Countless people were soaking in the river. It was obvious that some people were shivering from a cold. The men were bare-chested and only wore a pair of shorts. There were people of all ages. Most of them were old people, either extremely fat or extremely thin, and rarely in between. The women wore veils. only middle-aged and old people. They dove into the water, their white hair tangling with the veils, and came out again after drinking 2 mouthfuls. No one was smiling, and no one was seen chatting. Everyone was silently soaking in the water and drinking it. There were countless middle-aged men and women squatting on the steps brushing their teeth, but no one used a toothbrush. They usually used their fingers or tree branches. After brushing, they swallowed the water and then cupped a few handfuls to drink. It was the opposite of the direction in which people of other realms spat out water when they were brushing their teeth. Chapter 1484. Humans should know the basics of what to do and what not to do. It was hard to find a dead elephant in the world because even elephants knew how to cover it up. Once again, they had to thank our Taoist ancestors for teaching the humans of the mainstream domains so much about don't see no evil, hear no evil, move no evil, and do not do to others what you do not want to be done to you. Sometimes it seemed a little strict, but if there was no prohibition, how could there be civilization? If there was no fence, how could there be society? If there was no cover, how could there be shame? If there were no rules, how could there be order? By the eternal river, the 2 peacocks saw that the filth, ugliness, and death of humans could all be exposed in an exaggerated manner. They could all be released to others in nature without restraint. Because of the population explosion, this behavior was forming an unprecedented gathering. A huge number of people were rushing to the river day and night. The 2 peacock young gods were stunned. They could not imagine that there was such a place in the human world. The carrier of the Een spirit was the purest among the 3 stages of perfected monarchs and was easily contaminated. The primordial spirit was much more stable and sturdy when it left the body. Why did the Hengi domain choose a primordial spirit perfected monarch when they sent Bowazuo to carry out this mission? There was a deep reason for this. It could not be seen from the outside, but when they entered the eternal river, they immediately understood the intention. What was the most abundant in the eternal river? It was not the water essence, but the sustenance of people's spiritual souls. It could be imagined that with the size of a domain and the population of 10 billion, the number of souls in this river would be endless if almost every person's soul would be placed in this river after they died for hundreds of thousands of years. Although these souls were small, their numbers were huge. When they gathered together, they would form a heavy burden on the cultivator's spiritual soul. These souls liked strong and radiant sustenance the most, such as the yang spirit of a cultivator. When the 2 peacock yang gods entered the densely populated plains, they were like 2 pieces of smelly meat in the summer heat. All the flies in the surrounding area followed the smell and covered the sky. Next was the refined and pure Een spirit. The yang spirit was smelly meat, while the Een spirit here was a strange fragrance. Similarly, it attracted the love of the dead souls of the Hengi realm. They would rush up densely, and in the end, the Een spirit cultivator's Een spirit would swell to an unimaginable degree. It would be bloated and made it difficult for you to move. It would be hard for him to find his advantage in speed again. This was why the Hung River realm sent an essence divinity cultivator here. Here, the attraction of an essence divinity cultivator was the lowest. This was also the reason why Bohizo was not afraid of the 2 peacock young gods, nor was he afraid of this strange humanine god. He had nothing to fear. The eternal river is long. The further they swam, the more human souls of the Hung River covered their spiritual bodies. Here, in the long scroll of the eternal river, these human souls may be weak, but they will never die. There is no power that could completely destroy them. On the contrary, the more violent they were, the more they would attract the surrounding souls to cover them. It was a vicious cycle. Therefore, he was not in a hurry. Although the 2 peacock young gods were far ahead, this was just the beginning. Before they reached the middle section of the eternal river, they would be covered by the endless human souls of the Hung River. Their bodies would become bloated to a terrifying degree. It was like a ship that had been sailing in the ocean for a long time. Everywhere the bottom of the ship came into contact with the seawater, there would be a dense layer of sea creatures. The more time passed, the more the ship would lose its power, the heavier the draft, the more inconvenient the hull, and the slower it would turn. In the eternal river, there was no such thing as the bottom of the ship. The entire body was the hull, and as it moved forward, it would become thicker and thicker sea creatures. They would stick to the hull and become thicker and thicker, making it impossible for you to struggle and remove them. As for the foul-mouthed, vulgar, and refined scum next to him, it would not be long before he would no longer have the chance to be noisy by his side. He would be left far behind and entangled with those souls. Let's see if his rotten mouth could persuade the billions of souls to leave. Perfect. Outside the eternal river, thousands of demonic beasts were extremely bored. With their temperament and character, they preferred the kind of bloody and violent gambling fights. They were not interested in this kind of pure speed competition. Wherever there were humans, there would always be strange. From their point of view, they could clearly see the situation inside the scroll of eternity. This was done on purpose by Bowazo for the sake of fairness and transparency. He didn't want people to think that he was playing tricks inside the scroll of eternity. Therefore, he made every move public so that everyone could see through it. In the torrent of the eternal river, the two peacock young gods were far ahead, while the two humans were behind and entangled with each other. This was the situation of the gambling fight. Up to now, they had already swum 20% of the eternal river, and some abnormalities began to appear faintly. Why are the spiritual bodies of the two peacocks expanding? What's the reason? Yin Jun asked. He was very familiar with the supernatural powers of peacocks, but as a spiritual body, it was still impossible to know the real core of the peacock race. Therefore, he asked this question. The only remaining peacock young god, Kong Li, also frowned. This is not normal. Our peacock race has never used this kind of young god manipulation. It's harmful and not beneficial. There must be some special reason in the eternal river for the two sisters to act like this. It seems that they are resisting something. Yin Jun said seriously, from the point of view of the distance, there is no problem if we are far enough. But I don't know what will happen next. There must be something strange in the eternal river. Otherwise, the Hung River cultivator would not be so arrogant. Kong Li nodded. What is this human doing? He is inseparable from the Hung River cultivator? It can't be because of the same speed. It must be deliberate. So, is the Hung River cultivator doing it deliberately? Or is our relative doing it deliberately? Yin Jun, where did you find this human? You have known each other for tens of thousands of years. Your race is good at finding people. You can find a random person and have such a relationship. Yin Jun laughed dryly. Sister Li, this is not a random person. I am afraid that this is the first time in my tens of thousands of years of life. There will not be a second one in the future. This human is very special. The reason why I found him is not that he is really a relative of your peacock race. I thought this guy was bragging. It is because of other reasons that I can't explain to you at the moment. But you can rest assured that when it comes to the ability to make trouble, no one in the human world dares to say that they are the best. Just wait and see. I think the Hung River cultivator is going to be in trouble, staying with such a scourge. Isn't he digging his own grave? Kong Li nodded and then shook her head. He was really good at making trouble. He even made trouble for the ancestors of the peacock race. Chapter 1485. Lu Xiaoyi was not idling around. He did not only spend his energy on trash talking. Such trash talk had long become second nature to him, and he did not need to think. Once he opened his mouth, it would come out without stopping. It was actually just a cover to cover his search for the secrets of the eternal river. He dressed himself up as a rogue cultivator who didn't know how to choose his words. What he wanted to hide was the truth of his technique. His understanding of the river was far above most people. It could be that his knowledge came from a certain time and space in his previous life. Hence there were similarities. It was not entirely true to say that the river was unbearable. Any river in any human domain would have a beautiful section, but there would also be some sections that were extremely dirty. They cannot be categorized as a whole because it would be unfair. Floating corpses could be found everywhere. However, in the eternal river, in the hung river boundary, it was indeed the best place for a believer to die. This was also a fact. The rich and powerful could, of course, do it more gloriously and magnificently. However, for the commoners at the bottom, if they were still devout believers, they would really be waiting for their deaths by the river. Their wishes had been fulfilled. As for what would happen to the mother river after their deaths, who would care about that? In the Eternal River Scroll, there were 3 types of souls. The weakest kind were the believers. Their hearts were in the holy river, but due to various reasons, they were unable to offer their bodies to the mother river. Their souls would eventually drift into the eternal river, becoming the weakest, but also the largest group of people. There was another type of believers. After they died and cremated, their ashes would be thrown into the eternal river. Hence, their souls were slightly stronger. There were many souls in this group. The most powerful souls were the zealots who threw themselves into the eternal river before their deaths. Their bodies were either devoured by the aquatic creatures in the eternal river before or after their deaths, so they became the most powerful souls. This was especially true for those who threw themselves into the river before their deaths. After experiencing great pain and suffering, their souls returned to the Western paradise, leaving behind the most powerful souls. Pain could stimulate the soul. It was said that this kind of self-burial was the closest to the teachings. It was the easiest way to rise to a higher level in the next life. Lu Xiaoyi's Yin spirit could feel countless souls pouncing on his body. However, he couldn't reject them. No matter what kind of spiritual power he used, he couldn't completely reject the approach of these human souls who were also spiritual entities. This allowed him to quickly understand Hung River cultivators' intentions. This was why he and this guy were inseparable, and why they had to stick together. Since he couldn't use force, he needed to use smarter methods. Since the orthodoxy of the Hengi realm was also a part of Buddhism, no matter if it was a branch or the source, there would always be similarities. And he was a rare Taoist who was proficient in Buddhist techniques. This was where his advantage lay. He was trying to use all sorts of Tao realm powers to control these densely packed souls. Even if they were mortal souls, under the nourishment of the Mother River, they were indestructible existences. Just as he expected, all of the Tao realms were useless except for merit and impermanence. Lu Xiaoyi knew that he would never be able to compare to this cultivator in terms of knowledge of the Hung River system. Therefore, he shouldn't compete with him in terms of knowledge. He needed a smarter method. There was a time limit before he completely slowed down. He also knew that when using these souls, he couldn't rely on common sense and encourage the souls who were at the bottom of society. People like Chun Sheng and Wu Guang couldn't exist in such a religious system. The more the souls suffered in the previous life, the more fanatical they were and the more they supported this system. This was because they had finished their suffering and were going to have a better life in the next life. It was a very strange way of thinking, but it was deeply ingrained. The reason why the 2 peacock young gods became slower and slower in the Eternal River was that they didn't quite understand this basic principle that completely went against the trend of normal human thinking. Therefore, the more they struggled, the more souls surrounded them, and the slower they became. Lu Xiaoyi was also struggling, but his struggle was more targeted. He understood the strange nature of this Hung River system better. Why was it strong? What was its weakness? Because they were all spiritual entities, they still had the most basic communication with these mortal souls of the Hung River. Even if this communication was a bit messy, you couldn't imagine the pain when you faced trillions of voices. In this chaos, he discovered a very interesting phenomenon. The Eternal River, as the sacred river of the Hung River boundary, didn't have a single cultivator's soul. This was somewhat inconceivable. With this kind of orthodoxy, everyone was obsessed with their own religion. The cultivators should be the ones who benefited the most. It didn't make sense that after they died, They didn't come to the sacred river to stay. Not a single one. This wasn't normal. How could a river diagram, without a cultivator's soul, be refined into an acquired spiritual treasure? Because all living beings were equal? Because they valued ordinary mortals more? What a joke! How could these orthodox Taoist thoughts exist in an orthodoxy like the Hung River boundary? They were the most particular about social class. How could they be left out when there were benefits? There was only one reason. That Hung River boundary's Bohol purposely extracted the souls of the cultivators in the eternal river. His method was very simple. People who didn't understand the Hung River boundary might not be able to understand it even if they thought about it for a lifetime. But to him, it was just extracting the eternal river's soul. Yes, it must be like this. The eternal river soul that Bohol extracted was actually the souls of all the cultivators in the sacred river. The two were the same thing. And the question was, why did Bohol do this? What benefits did it have for him? Lu Xiaoyi felt that he had already come into contact with the edge of the truth. He was just a little bit away from finding out where this Hung River boundary cultivator's life gate was. What could it be? He quickly thought about all the inconceivable aspects of this orthodoxy. A thought flashed through his mind. This was a lowly cultivator. It couldn't be wrong. Only a lowly cultivator would be so wary of the eternal river's soul. Wary of the eternal river's soul's restriction on him. He had always found it strange. Even if it was to show his impartiality, very few cultivators were willing to extract the soul from their treasures. That meant that the treasures would lose all control and would only be able to operate by instinct. As time passed, who knew what kind of harm it would cause? Due to the time limit of this battle, Bohol wasn't too worried about losing control of the eternal river scroll. Thus, he borrowed the authority of his sect to extract the eternal river's soul so that he could move freely in the eternal river. Such a strange action would be inconceivable in other realms. But in a place like the Hung River boundary, it was completely possible. Cultivators with high surnames and low realms had a higher status than those with low surnames and high realms. With this judgment, he had a direction to take. Lu Xiaoyi revealed a mischievous smile. In the eternal river, it wasn't only the souls of cultivators that were divided into different levels. Even the souls of ordinary people were divided into different levels. Chapter 1486. Lu Xiaoyi used his virtuous Tao realm to secretly spread this news. To the souls in the eternal river, whether or not they were cultivators' souls was very important. The souls of ordinary cultivators were very picky about who could control the eternal river scroll. This type of pickiness was not based on the level of cultivation, but on the social class one was born into. To put it bluntly, the family you were born into would forever determine your social status. Even if you were very capable, very rich, and could cultivate, you still couldn't escape from this vicious cycle of discrimination. The souls left behind in the sacred river after a cultivator's death could sense the realm and social status of the person who held the spiritual treasure, but mortal souls would not actively differentiate. Because they did not cultivate, when they bathed in the so-called sacred river after death, it was very difficult for them to have any complicated thoughts. When they were alive, they were enslaved, and when they died in the sacred river, they were still manipulated by others. This was their true situation. They did not have such thoughts, but it did not mean that they did not have the ability to do so. The social hierarchy was a supreme existence that was deeply engraved in their hearts. It would never be erased. Once it was awakened, it would explode with shocking combat power. Outside the eternal river scroll, their combat power was not worth mentioning, but inside the scroll, they were undead souls. When enough weak souls gathered together, they could unleash unimaginable power. The most important thing was that the only person who could restrain them, the scroll spirit, was not here. The eternal river scroll's rules were that the holder could restrain the scroll spirit, and the scroll spirit could restrain the billions of souls in the scroll. Now that the scroll spirit, who was in the middle position, had been taken away, There was a lot of room for imagination. Lu Xiaoyi had done something naughty. He had deceived and spread the news of Bowazo's identity as a lowly commoner. He was not completely sure. In fact, he was not clear about the social hierarchy of the Hung River realm. All he had to do was faintly mention it, and the high-class souls would naturally differentiate between them, and they would immediately discover the secret. A lowly commoner could cultivate? He was doing even better than them. The high-class souls? How could this be tolerated? The change had begun in silence. In the beginning of the competition, Bowazo leisurely looked at the Taoist beside him who was struggling to keep up with his pace, just to spew a few words of trash. This person was really born with a sharp tongue. It was as if he wanted to take advantage of others with his mouth at every moment. It was as if he couldn't live without taking advantage of others. He allowed this Taoist to spout nonsense. Firstly, his mouth could not keep up. Secondly, he would widen the distance between them step by step during the long journey. This foul-mouthed Taoist could only look at his back in despair, unable to find a target to spout nonsense to. This was the best way to take revenge on people with foul mouths. He almost did it. When they reached about 30% of the Eternal River, the gap between the two of them began to widen. Bohezuo was very surprised at this Taoist's super strong mental strength. In his mind, a normally master would be left behind if they couldn't reach 10% of the Eternal River. However, this guy actually managed to reach 30% of the Eternal River. From this, one could see how tough his mental strength was. If the two of them were to fight in the outside universe, he might not necessarily have the upper hand in terms of mental strength. This made him a little apprehensive. Peacock's relatives were indeed extraordinary. If they were to really fight, even though he was in the primordial divinity realm, it would not be easy for him. It also depended on the methods of the other party. But here, in the Eternal River, he would definitely win. As expected, when they reached about 30% of the distance, the gap between the two of them began to widen. The Taoist cursed loudly, but to Bohezuo's ears, it was incomparably painful. This was because this hysteria was expanding in the Taoist's despair. In the cultivation world, what was the use of cursing? Until the Taoist figure could no longer be seen, and he could no longer hear his crazy curses. One of them was finished, and now there were only two left. It shouldn't take too long. At this moment, he felt that something was wrong with him. It seemed that the number of souls in his body had increased, and they were more malicious. Moreover, this situation continued to expand, becoming more and more serious. Yin Master, Primordial Divinity, Yang Master. These three types of mental strength behaved very differently in the Eternal River. Among them, the Primordial Divinity had the least attraction to the soul. However, the current situation had somewhat exceeded his understanding of this acquired spiritual treasure. This was not his spirit treasure, but it was sent by the master of this mission. Because many of his fellow disciples with a higher social status were unwilling to come and deal with the ever-changing demonic beasts, in the end, this mission fell on him. He was not familiar with the Eternal River Scroll spirit, and he was very clear that these high-level souls might not take him seriously. That was why he purposely sent the scroll spirit away. This was his little thought. He was afraid that these fellows who valued social status above everything else would cause trouble for him during the mission. However, the current situation puzzled him. He had never thought that after the souls of the cultivators were taken away from the scroll, the sea of mortal souls would also cause harm to him. The harm was actually happening. It was not an instinctive attachment to the cultivator's spiritual body, but a conscious and purposeful hatred. It was the disdain and anger of the higher class towards the lower class. His roots, his real identity in the Hung River boundary. How was it discovered? It was impossible. Mortal souls would not have such awareness. The two peacocks and the Taoist had only met for the first time. It seemed impossible. Where did the problem come from? More and more souls took the initiative to pounce on him, especially the souls of those with high surnames. Under their lead, the sea of lowly souls who had long been used to being enslaved also followed behind their former masters. They spared no effort to perform, just to be able to rise to a higher level after reincarnation. The unique structure of society in the Hung River realm meant that this kind of thing was not new. This was something that would never happen in other realms. How could mortals be dissatisfied with true cultivators, look down on them, and be filled with hatred? However, in the Hung River boundary, all of this happened naturally, because here, social status was above everything, even higher than cultivators and mortals. Bohizo felt helpless. He knew too well how terrifying the souls in the Eternal River Scroll were. They could not be destroyed at all. The more they struggled, the worse it would be, just like the two peacock young gods in front of him. Around his spiritual body, the souls were still gathering in large numbers. When this kind of news gradually spread, it had a certain audience, and the speed of its spread began to exponentially increase. Previously, it was a small stream, then a large river. Now, it had become a vast ocean that covered the sky and covered the earth. All the souls that pounced on him had the same consciousness. How could a lowly commoner like you have the right to do whatever you want in the Eternal River? Without the scroll's spirit controlling it, the Eternal River Scroll began to lose control. This was the instinct of countless souls. It was their self-indulgence, because they were the unique people of the Hung River boundary. Chapter 1487. Bohal's primordial spirit swelled like a bubble. The demonic beasts outside were baffled. In fact, after such a long time, Yanjun, Kong Li, and some other discerning great demons could roughly see the truth of the Eternal River. There were countless souls in it, which was the main culprit behind the two peacock young gods swimming slower and slower. But the problem was, as the owner of the Eternal River, how did Bohal's primordial spirit swell up? People said that to kill 1,000 enemies, you would lose 800 of your own, but he lost 2,000 of his own. Among the 4 spiritual bodies, Lu Xiaoyi, who was swimming at the back, didn't seem so bloated. What's going on? Kong Li was very puzzled, but that didn't mean that the young gods didn't have her sharp eyes. The primordial spirit is the key. I guess that everything that happened in the Eternal River is related to the primordial spirit being pulled out. We have to stop it. We can't let it go back on its own. Yanjun nodded in agreement. I've already cast the wild goose fog technique around the primordial spirit. It can't go back, but it's very strange. It can clearly see that its host cultivator might be in trouble, but it doesn't seem to want to go back. It just symbolically broke through and didn't try again. It's really a strange domain. The people are strange, and the spiritual treasures are also strange. But I'm not surprised by this result. With this guy inside, how can it be normal? There will definitely be something fishy going on. The two peacock young gods had no idea what was going on behind them. Only one person had a thorough understanding of what was going on behind them. Lu Xiaoyi leisurely swam forward, and as expected, he saw a huge blob of mental expansion in front of him. It was so big that it took up almost 30% of the river. With such a size, it would be difficult for it to float in the Eternal River. He came to the side of the unlucky Hung River cultivator and said in surprise, "Fellow Taoist, why are you swollen? Just like a spongy sponge? Could it be that there are too many spiritual bodies of the opposite sex in the Eternal River, so you can't help it?" Bohal gritted his teeth. "Evil Tao, what did you do? Such a despicable method. You're ashamed of your Taoist ancestors." Lu Xiaoyi laughed. As expected, as expected. It's all ancestral. Speaking of which, your mentality is very wrong. Only you can win. If someone else wins, it's because they use tricks. You've been doing this ever since you entered the Eternal River Scroll. What did I say? Is this how the cultivators of the Hung River realm mingle in the outside world? Bohizo threatened. "Fellow Taoist, you have a huge grudge with the cultivators of the Hung River realm. Don't think that I can't catch you just because the universe is big. In the origin world, our Hung River sect's influence is much greater than you can imagine." Lu Xiaoyi didn't care at all. He deliberately tried to seduce her. So what? As long as I'm full, the whole family won't be hungry. Once in a universe, you'll find a hammer. I have a backer too, and it's also a great power of a major domain. The heavens are high, and the emperor is far away. What can you do to me? The soul became more and more ferocious. The worst thing was that Lu Xiaoyi didn't care about his own body and started to use his own mind to invade Bohizo's mind. A Yin spirit body invading a primordial spirit body was very inconceivable. In the outside world, there were bodies, artifacts, and all kinds of spells. It wasn't that a Yin spirit true monarch couldn't threaten a primordial spirit body. However, on the spiritual level, it was basically impossible for a Yin spirit body to destroy a primordial spirit body. That was a realm suppression. But in this place, Lu Xiaoyi had trillions of helpers. For every bit of his soul that he destroyed, the souls of immortals that were as ferocious as wolves and tigers would grow stronger. This time, it wasn't just a matter of how fast they swam. It had become a matter of life and death. Lu Xiaoyi sent out a message again. He vaguely said that as long as they completely devoured this cultivator's mind, every mortal soul here would be able to reincarnate faster. Under such temptation, countless mortal souls started to go berserk. To them, even if a primordial spirit body was a cultivator's, so what if they devoured it? The situation was getting more and more dangerous for Bohizo. He had to fight for his survival now. What made him even more desperate was that he didn't even know how to fight. His divine sense went straight to evil beside him. We're just competing in speed, not life and death. Fellow Taoist, aren't you afraid of harming the harmony of the world by attacking so viciously? Lu Xiaoyi said seriously, there's one thing that you people of Hung River Tribe must understand. There's a price to pay for showing off. No one will spoil your bad habit. You have to see clearly who you're teasing. You can tease kittens and puppies if you want, but if your opponent is strong enough, you'd better tie up your damned ADHD hands. It's very dangerous to reach out blindly. If others ignore you, you'll continue. If you touch something soft, you'll pinch it. This habit has to be changed. What's a competition in speed? I don't have this habit. If you dare to show off in front of me, you'll have to bear the consequences of being killed by me. Swim? Swim my ass. I don't swim. I only know how to drown people. If they drown to death, I'll naturally win. Is this logic very difficult to understand? Bohizo was swept up in a frenzy. He finally understood that this person not only had a foul mouth, but his hands were also black and his heart was even more ruthless. They didn't know each other, but he was gambling on behalf of someone else. He defined his actions as a matter of life and death. If all the people in the cultivation world were like him, how many were left? Feeling his opponent's powerful spiritual invasion, he knew that he had reached the final moment. These souls of Hung River Tribe's mortals wouldn't betray evil because he wasn't from Hung River Tribe. There was no difference in social class. Their only target was him. Although he was born lowly, he had outstanding talent and was lucky enough to walk on the path of cultivation. Under such a spiritual attack, even if he was a primordial spirit, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. He didn't have any specific techniques to deal with it because he was only a spiritual body now. Any movement would make those mortal souls even crazier. For his life, he could only use his final threat. Believe me, you can't escape. The eternal river will never be destroyed. Everything here will be transmitted back to my sect. You and your sect will be faced with countless troubles. All kinds of orthodoxies, all kinds of races. No matter how far it is the fifth ring far? We can still find you. There are also enemies you've never seen before. Zerg, the winged man. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. Just this one sentence alone was enough to deduce a lot of things. He could even dispatch Zerg, the winged man. He didn't relax his spiritual invasion at all. He chuckled. Anything else? Let me hear it. Bohizo didn't delve deeper. He deeply felt the threat of death and changed his method. I'm just a lowly commoner. I'm the one with the least status in the Hung River Tribe. Why do you have to make things difficult for me? If you're willing to let go, I can swear that whatever happens in the Eternal River Scroll today won't be heard by a second person. Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. You still know that you're a lowly commoner? Do you know why I'm scolding you? Since you've already become a monarch, and your clansmen are still living in the abyss of suffering. Just based on this point, it's not a waste to be cursed. You deserve to die not because you're a lowly commoner, but because you're willing to be lowly. Chapter 1488. Under the gaze of thousands of demonic beasts, Boazo's spiritual body began to turn illusory and was no longer solid. This meant that his spiritual power was going downhill. This meant death. It was only at this moment that the scroll spirit began to struggle violently. It was one thing to give this lowly commoner a hard time, but it was another thing to let him die. However, with Yanjun and Kong Li, two top demonic beasts at the Yang spirit level, there was no way it could break out of the encirclement. It was just a Yang spirit acquired spiritual treasure. Moreover, most of the demonic beasts were not on its side this time. Extracting the scroll spirit was the idea of the Hengi man. Why? Now that it was about to die, it wanted to shrink its head and deny it? Demonic beasts love to watch deathmatch. Although it was not very exciting, it was still better than a normal battle. Gradually, the relaxed atmosphere turned serious, and then a chill enveloped his entire body. Demonic beasts were used to seeing blood and punches, so they looked down on humans scratching and scratching. Even if the demonic beasts' battle records were far inferior to that of humans, they had always regarded their own fighting style as the true fighting style between males. However, in the Eternal River, they saw a different kind of fighting style. It was a way of mercilessly devouring the souls of cultivators. Although it was not bloody, it was even crueler and colder. The demonic beast method was fast and violent. Blood filled the sky, and their shouts shook the heavens and earth. However, this kind of soul-devouring was silent. It was plundering strand by strand, just like the comparison between being cut in half and being dismembered. Boazo's spiritual body had expanded to a terrifying extent, almost blocking the entire river. However, compared to the size of the spiritual body, Boazo's primordial spirit at the core had been swallowed to the edge of danger. Not only was it as small as a human fist, but it was also extremely thin. He gathered the last of his strength and shouted with his soul, "Why? Why are you so ruthless?" Lu Xiaoyi was as cold as ever. "Are you eating with your right hand? Then what are you doing with your left hand?" Boazo could not think of how his situation was related to this ordinary life problem. "My left hand is unclean, so—" Lu Xiaoyi slammed his spirit upwards. "So you deserve to die." When Boazo's spirit was devoured by the billions of souls in the Eternal River, Lu Xiaoyi found that his situation was not good. Because he was too close, he was suspected of being caught in the crossfire. Even if he was a powerful primordial spirit cultivator with extremely powerful spiritual energy, it was still a drop in the ocean when faced with the billions of souls in the Hengi realm. The competition was not over yet, because the ghost had set the ending condition for the long river swim to be that one person would be the last to finish the swim. He had not expected that someone would die in the middle. His thinking was too. No wonder he would die in his own spiritual body. Lu Xiaoyi was unlikely to compete for the first place. It was meaningless. As long as one of the two peacock yang gods went out, all he needed to do was wait quietly. But now, the wait was fraught with danger. That was because the countless souls around were still in a state of savagery and couldn't calm down on their own. Once the restlessness began, it was as if the demons that had been hiding in their hearts for a long time had been awakened. Fortunately, Lu Xiaoyi wasn't from the Hung River realm. If he was, then no matter what social class he was from, unless it was the noblest class, he would be devoured by these souls that were on the verge of losing control without leaving anything behind. However, Yanjun and Kong Li were still doing their duty. They refused to let Wan Ling go back to preside over the long scroll. They were afraid that if something went wrong, the people of Hengi River would refuse to admit their mistakes. They had to wait for Peacock Sun's spirit to wander to the end of the duel. Lu Xiaoyi realized that he was in danger. The problem was that he couldn't run fast enough. He could only, there are actually many other ways to cross the social hierarchy. You don't have to wait for reincarnation. Now, let me tell you a story. There are two main characters in the story, Chun Sheng and Wu Guang. He tried to tell it as vividly and in detail as possible, and he even added some details, because he didn't know when the two peacock sun spirit would be able to swim out. Now it seemed that it was impossible to reach a fast speed with the help of these endless souls. But no matter how long the story was, there would be a time when it was finished. If too much information was added, it would become bloated and affect the overall interest and provocation of the story. However, the two peacocks were not finished yet. He had to start telling a new story because the soul's interest had been aroused. Moreover, they seemed to be dissatisfied with the tragic ending. What I just said represented a kind of spirit. It doesn't mean that it will definitely fail. I'm telling it to you so that you know the meaning of resistance. Next, let's tell you the story of Grandpa Liu Bang. This story was much longer. With many tragic heroes as a foil, the main character's image was very full and wise. The result was a happy ending for everyone, but the souls were still not satisfied. This was because the main character was already 54 years old when he succeeded. It seemed like he could not enjoy anything anymore. Why were they so picky? The two peacocks weren't very helpful, so Lu Xiaoyi had no choice but to waste his breath. Now, Big Brother Zhu Yuanzhang has made his grand entrance. This is a powerful person who ascended the throne at the age of 40. Big Brother Zhu didn't even finish half of the story when the Eternal River suddenly collapsed. Lu Xiaoyi was thrown out of the acquired spiritual treasure, and Kong, she was the first to rush out of the Eternal River, completing the setting of the bet between Bozol and himself. Among the demonic beasts, other than the roe deer race and their allies, the rest of the demonic beasts calmly accepted this result. This was the good thing about demonic beasts. Although they were brave and ruthless, they were willing to admit defeat and never acted shamelessly. Once the result was out, Yanjun and Kong Li withdrew their control over the spirit. With a flash, the spirit disappeared into the long scroll of the Eternal River. With another sweep, it wanted to sweep up Bahezuo's corporeal body. However, its movements weren't as fast as Yanjun's fog, and it swept up nothing. This spiritual treasure was also very clever. It knew that it couldn't be impudent in the beast territory, and since it had lost its controller, it could only resign itself to its fate. The entire Eternal River flashed a few times in the starry sky and disappeared. This kind of treasure couldn't be held because its roots were in the Hung River boundary, in the true mother stream of the Hung River boundary. There was no power in this world that could stop its return. At the very least, the Yang spirit demonic beasts present couldn't. The roe deer race left resentfully. They couldn't fight or even question because they had tacitly agreed to let the Hung River human cultivators do it. If they fought now, it wouldn't be a problem of whether they could establish a foothold in this space, but a problem of whether they could establish a foothold in the beast territory. These Hung River people were too weak. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.